Okay.
All right. So this is now being live streamed online. All right. We are live and you are ready to start.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It is 9 o'clock, and I would like to call the meeting to order of the Transportation Committee of Thursday, May 19th, 2022. Before we begin, please note this meeting is live streamed on YouTube and being recorded. Members of the public are encouraged to watch and listen to the meeting on YouTube, but if you would like to provide public comment at today's meeting, and if you haven't done so already, please call 415-569-6446 and let the facilitator know what items you would like to speak on today. Please bear with us as we move through today's meeting. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all. Starting with Director Maston.
Here.
Director Melgar was absent. Director Rabbit.
Here.
Director Rodoni.
Here.
Director Snyder was absent. Director Thier.
Here.
Vice Chair Hill.
Here.
Chair Arnold.
Here.
And President Terrio.
Here.
Thank you. Also on the line, there's a lot of movement going on, but also on the line, we have, I believe, Directors Cochran. Director Conroy, are you on?
Cochran, Jerry.
Director Conroy, are you on? Oh, that's okay, I see him. Director Garbarino is on as well. Director Giudice, I don't believe is on the line. Director Grosball, are you on the line? Is not on the line. And Director Hernandez is here on the line, as well as Director Parr. And let's see, and Director Stephanie is not on the line. I think that is everyone. So you have a quorum and you are a committee of the whole.
All right.
So I believe we also see Dennis Mulligan is here. Joe Wire. And Ava Bauer-Furbish is not with us today, but John Eberly is here with us today.
Morning.
Thank you, John. And Kim Manolius is here.
Morning.
Dave Rivera. Dave Rivera is here, I believe.
Good morning. Good morning.
There you go. Mona Babauta is on the line.
Yes, present.
Oh, thank you. Jim Swindler.
Present.
And Kelly Hopper.
Present.
All right, great. That's everyone on the line. Thank you so much, everybody.
All right, thank you. I would like to remind everyone to mute their microphones until after staff's presentation, and remember to unmute when we open up for directors' discussion. If we have directors calling in by phone, please use your mute button or *6 to unmute yourself. After staff's presentation, I will be asking for any questions or comments on the item. Click on Reactions and Raise Hands on your computer if you have a question, or press *9 for the hand raise function if joining by phone. If there are any questions, the secretary or I will call on you accordingly. If we missed your raised hand, please speak up. After our discussion, we will ask for any public comment before moving on. Please follow along by referring to the page numbers located on the bottom right-hand corner of your meeting packet. Madam Secretary, please introduce the first item.
Oh, thank you. Hang on one second. We are looking, and John Gaffney, who is trying to join the line, is unable to join the webinar. I'm not sure why. So I am going to just double check if he is in our waiting room, because I was going to introduce let me introduce the first item first. How's that? We're going to start with agenda item 3, which is an informational report regarding district's accessibility bus and ferry advisory committee. And that report's located on page 3 to 41. Staff's available to answer any questions from directors.
Okay, are there any questions from directors regarding the item 3? Okay, that concludes discussion on this item. Madam Secretary, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on item 3?
We have no speakers on this item.
Okay. All right, so thank you. No action is required for item 3. Madam Secretary, please continue to the next item.
Thanks. We're going to move on to agenda item number 4, which is authorize execution of a second amendment with Vivalon for emergency ADA backup service for the Larkspur Ferry. That report is starting on page 43 of your packet. And we were going to have ADA compliance and program manager John Gaffney to present the report. But Dennis, can you step in for John? I'm going to try and get him in,
Certainly.
but while we're doing that.
Certainly.
I
Um,
can
Oh.
do it over the phone if you prefer.
Oh, that's great. You're here on the phone. That's perfect. I'm glad. Okay, thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Dennis.
Oh, no worries. I just wanted to make sure everyone knew I was here. Good morning, Chair Arnold, members of the committee. Sorry about the technical difficulties this morning. John Gaffney, ADA Compliance and Program Manager for the district. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. The action before you today requests approval of an amendment to contract number 2022F-85, Vivalon ADA shuttle bus services in the amount of $254,687 for emergency ADA backup service for the Larkspur Ferry. If approved by the Transportation Committee, this item will be referred to the Board of Directors at its May 20th, 2022 meeting for the appropriate action. In July 2021, the district's ferry terminal located at the San Francisco Ferry Building was shut down due to mechanical failures with the movable ramps and gangways that allow access to differently configured Golden Gate ferry vessels. To continue scheduled ferry service without interruption, the district transferred ferry operations to Gate B. The district's ferry terminal at Larkspur is designed for upper deck boarding and debarkation only. Using Gate B requires passengers to disembark on the lower deck of the vessel. As the district's high-speed catamarans are not equipped with elevators, passengers boarding in Larkspur must use the stairs within the vessel to move from one deck to another to complete their trip. This renders those vessels inaccessible to individuals with disabilities who cannot traverse the internal staircase. To remain compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, the district elected to provide emergency backup service for individuals with disabilities who wish to travel between Larkspur and San Francisco. This was initially provided internally by the district's bus division, but in January of 2022, the bus division was unable to continue providing this service due to staffing constraints. As a replacement for the bus division coverage, an emergency backup van service was contracted to Vivalon so the district could remain compliant with the ADA. As the service had to be implemented quickly, a short-term contract was entered into with Vivalon under the general manager's authority. It is important to note that this is not ADA mandated paratransit service as operated through a separate contract to complement our fixed route bus service. This is instead a separate service that has been set up in response to the district's obligation to provide access for all individuals to travel between Larkspur and San Francisco. Though provided on a different service mode, this is as close to equivalent service as can be provided for individuals with disabilities wishing to use the Larkspur Ferry until such a time as repairs can be conducted. Construction is underway on the inner berth and is anticipated to be completed in September. The time frame for completion of repairs for the outer berth is yet to be determined. Staff is recommending that the Transportation Committee recommends that the board approve an extension to this contract for an additional period of 6 months. The extension would extend the contract through December 31st, 2022, and would constitute an amendment in the not to exceed amount of $254,687. It is important to note that the contract with Vivalon contains a cancellation clause in which either party may cancel the contract within 1 week's advance notice. This clause would be implemented should the repairs required be completed prior to the conclusion of this contract period. Thank you all. This concludes my report. At this time, I am available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, John, for your presentation, and thanks to staff for mobilizing quickly and getting this interim service up while the San Francisco berth is under repair. Are there any questions or comments from directors on item 4?
Director Arnold, a quick question.
Yes.
So our standard berth and gate B are at opposite ends of the ferry terminal, ferry building in San Francisco. Where are we picking up and dropping off for this service, for the Vivillon service? And have there been any issues for the disabled with pickup and drop off point?
Currently, the pickup and drop off point in San Francisco is out in front of the ferry building itself, in one of the bus berths that's out there that is not currently in use. Our contract with Vivillon has included assistance with individuals if they need assistance getting to and from the ferry berth to the vehicle itself. I have not heard of any issues to date.
Okay. Jim Maston, Director
thank you.
Maston.
This is a 6-month contract. If it goes beyond 6 months, I didn't see that there were any potential for additional months if needed. Did I miss that, or do we have to go back to the drawing board?
We would have to come back to the board if it went beyond 6 months.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
I just had a comment, if that's
Yes.
okay. I just wanted to commend the project managers and staff. It looks like the SBE, Small Business Enterprise Participation for the contract, is approximately 40.3%, whereas the goal was set at 13%. So I just wanted to commend staff for reaching out and making sure that there were enough subcontractors that were small businesses.
Thank you, Director Tier. Anyone else? All right, that concludes discussion on the item. And before we take our vote, Madam Secretary, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on item 4?
We do have one speaker today for, actually, we're on, I'm sorry, he's on item 5. So I'm going to hold off. It's not on item 4, but no speakers on item 4. We have a speaker on item 5.
Okay, so thank you. So I will now entertain a motion on item 4. Anyone want to make the motion?
So moved, Rabbit.
Okay, and a second? Yes, Bert Hill, Director Hill. All right, so a roll call, please.
Thank you. We're voting on item number 4, and we'll start with you, Chair Arnold.
Aye.
Director Conroy is absent. Director Garbarino.
Aye.
Director Giudice is absent. Director Grosball is absent. Director Hernandez.
Aye.
Director Maston.
Aye.
Thank you. Director Melgar is absent. Director Parr.
Aye.
Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Director Rodoni.
Aye.
Director Snyder is absent. Director Stephanie is absent. Director Thier.
Yes.
Yes. Second Vice President Hill.
Yes.
First Vice President Cochran.
Yes.
And President Theriault.
Yes.
Yes, you have 11 ayes. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion passes. Madam Secretary, please continue with the agenda.
Thank you. We're going to move on to item number 5, which is a monthly report on bridge traffic, transit rider trends, and transit service performance. The staff report begins on page 47, and Dennis is here to present this report. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yes, the written report is before you. The report's a historic report we do that the pandemic has kind of upended because it shows you, 12-month rolling averages. And so it kind of mirrors it masks the impacts of the pandemic. But later this morning, under the finance meeting, you'll have a presentation that has a chart that shows trends for 2019, 20, 21, and 22 with colored lines. That's very illustrative. With respect to bridge traffic, though, compared to pre-pandemic levels, we're down between 15 and 20%. Bus ridership is down about 60%, and ferry ridership is down about 60%. That's where things stand today. And with that, I'm available to answer any questions.
Any questions from directors? Okay, I don't see any. All right, that concludes discussion on this item. Thank you very much, General Manager Mulligan. And Madam Secretary, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on item 5?
Yes, we have Mr. David Pilpel, who would like to comment on item 5. So we're going to have him join our call today. David, are you on?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine, thank you. Go ahead.
All right. Yay technology. Good morning, David Pilpel. Just wanted to start out by saying that the change to video seems to be working on my end. In case anyone's interested, I can see wonderful faces there. I think I'm doing the world a favor by not being on video, so you can't see me. That's all good. I did just want to mention that there is an option for subtitles or closed captions, but that doesn't seem to be working. I don't know if that's something that can be fixed for tomorrow or the future. If I've got the YouTube muted, it's sometimes helpful to see the captions while doing other things. Anyway, there's that. On this item, on item 5, the trends, although the charts in particular, page 6 is my favorite, with the bus and ferry passengers per trip and fare box recovery, although that aggregates, I assume, all of the data for each month, showing the average. It doesn't show it by route or by trip. That's certainly a level of detail that the board probably doesn't need, but I'm wondering if there are highs and lows there, if there's some indication of particular bus and ferry trips that show high usage or frankly low or no usage. That would be interesting to highlight, if not now, perhaps in the future. I seem to remember this being a monthly report from years ago when transportation met every month, but it's been a while. Transportation meets occasionally now. Anyway, I'm just interested in the highs and lows and not just the averages. And finally, since COVID numbers seem to be up in all 3 counties and in the region and in the world, I'm just thinking about what that's going to continue to do for, in particular for bus and ferry ridership recovery, but also for the bridge going forward. So continuing concerns about health impacts on our transportation system. Those are my thoughts. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for that. All right, so there's no action required on this informational report. So Madam Secretary, please continue with the agenda.
Thank you. We're going to move on to item 6 for a monthly report on activities related to marine transit. Dennis, do you have anything to add to this report?
Just that negotiations are ongoing for a new multi-year agreement for Golden Gate to continue to provide Summer Marine Transit's fixed route bus service. Negotiations are ongoing, and hopefully as soon as maybe next month, we'll have an item to bring for you to approve.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Are there any questions or comments from directors on item 6? And I don't see any. All right, so that concludes discussion on this item. Madam Secretary, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on item 6? Or address this committee under item 7, excuse me,
No problem.
which is public comment.
We have no other speakers for item 6 or under public comment for item 7.
Okay. I do have a question for Dennis. The man that just spoke brought it to mind. Do you see any changes in how things are going to work out with if the news is right that the COVID is upon us again in a different way, but seems to be, fairly serious. And I just wonder what you feel about that.
So we are seeing the 6th wave just in our own workforce. We've had 15 employees test positive since my last memo last week. So it's affecting things on the margins. Transit ridership is slowly trending up. It's taken a slight pause, but not a significant pause. With respect to Mr. Pilpels and the highs and lows, it's less of an issue by route because we only put service out there where there's demand. But the highs and lows is more a function of days of the week. So Mondays and Fridays are light on the commute service that we have out there. But we are seeing a slight flattening of the growth that we were seeing, but we think it's just temporary until we get through this current wave. And we think, long term, we're still seeing travel improve. We're light years ahead where we were a year ago. So a year ago, last month in March, on ferry, we carried 10 times more passengers than we did March of 2021. So we've come a long ways. We're still down about 60%, but we are slowly trending up. But it does look like it's taken a slight pause, but not a significant pause. And it's not, diving downward. It just looks like the employers are, rethinking and slowing down how often they're bringing people back into the office.
Okay, great. I also hear that there's a problem with finding new employees because so many have left. I don't know if that's the case here, but I know it is in other places, including our county.
It is an issue for us. We didn't hire during the pandemic because, we're hemorrhaging money. We thought we might have to do layoffs. Now that we have a lot of federal assistance, we're actively recruiting bus operators. We have needs in many classifications, but one of our more pressing needs is bus operators. Mona has partnered with the ATU and College of Marin and Santa Rosa Junior College on a very creative program for pre-apprenticeships for bus operators that we think will pay major dividends. But we are in hiring mode. If anyone from the public is out there listening, we encourage them to go to goldengate.org and to click on the link to join our team.
Thank you. goldengate.org, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Thank you so much. We've reached the end of the agenda, and may I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
All right. Do I have a second?
Second, Rabbit.
Thank you. Hearing no objections, this concludes the meeting of the Transportation Committee. I want to thank the colleagues, and the time is 9:23 a.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. How's this? If you want to, what I'll do is just so you know, the live stream is still live because we were going to roll into the next meeting, but let's start B&O at 9:30. That way it's an easy start. Give someone a second to turn off their cameras and actually step away, and we'll reconvene at 9:30. Okay?
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Oh, Patty.
Hi, guys. Hi, Mike. Hi,
Hi.
everybody. I'll do my best to handle this technologically, but as David knows, I can't seem to find the dang raised hand thing. So I tend to do the Queen's wave when I need to speak. So anybody pipe in if we need to do this better. I do. So there you go.
I'm personally good at being loud when I need to be, so that's fine.
All good. Thank you.
You're
Thank
doing
you.
great so far.
Well, see, there you go. I should just stop. This is a good point. But before I start the meeting, because it is 9:30, I have to shout out to Amarette. She is just the best. I could cry. The way she saves us and helps us and prepares us. And I had to chuckle. Okay, clearly I have a script, we all do. On the bottom where it says, or press *9, she puts in parens *9, so she knows my level of functioning. It's perfect, the job she does. So thanks so much. And I'll ask her permission to get the meeting started, this portion. Is that okay, Amarette? I see a nodding head. Great. It is 9:30 a.m. and I would like to call to order the meeting of the Building and Operating Committee of Thursday, May 19, 2022. Before we begin, please note this meeting is live streamed on YouTube and being recorded. Members of the public are encouraged to watch and listen to the meeting on YouTube, but if you would like to provide public comment at today's meeting, and if you haven't already done so, please call 415-569-6446 and let the facilitator know that items you would like to speak on, which ones you'd like to speak on. I appreciate everyone's patience as we move through today's meeting. Madam Secretary, please call roll.
Thank you, and good morning again, everyone. We're going to start with Director Cochran.
Here.
Director Conroy. Director Conroy. Oh, I see Director Conroy muting and unmuting. I'll come back to you, Director Conroy. Director Hernandez.
Here.
Thank you. Director Parr.
Here.
Director Rabbit.
Here.
Director Thier.
Here.
Thank you. Vice Chair Maston.
Here.
Chair Garbarino.
Here.
And President Tirio.
Here.
Thank you. And also on the line, we still have, I'll come back. Director Conroy, we see you muting and unmuting. I'm not sure if we can come back to you later, but I see Director Rodoni still on the line. And Director Hill is on the line. I don't see Director Grossball or just Director Stephanie Melgar Snyder, Judah Che, and Director Arnold is gone. So, okay, you have a quorum and you are a committee of the whole still. We're going to start now with General Manager Mulligan.
Here.
Joe Wire.
Yes.
John Eberly.
Present.
Great. Kim Manolius.
Morning.
Thank you. Dave Rivera.
Good morning, President.
Mona Babauta.
Present.
Jim Swindler.
Present.
And Kelly Hopper.
Good morning.
All right, good morning. Thank you. That confirms staff on the line.
Great. Thank you again. I would like to remind everyone to mute their microphones until after staff's presentation, and remember to unmute when we open up for directors' discussion. If we have directors calling in by phone, please use your mute button or *6 to unmute yourself. After staff's presentation, I will be asking for any questions or comments on the item. Click on Reactions and Raised Hand on your computer if you have a question, or press *9 for the raise hand function if joining by phone. If there are any questions, the secretary or I will call on you accordingly. If we miss your raised hand, please do speak up. After our discussion, we will ask for any public comment before moving on. Please follow along by referring to the page numbers located at the bottom right-hand corner of your meeting packet. We will begin with agenda item number 3 to approve actions relative to award of contract number 2022 B043, aluminum clip fabrication for suspension bridge sound reduction project. The staff report begins on page 3, and since Ewa isn't able to join us today, we will have Deputy Director, District Engineer, John Eberly here today to present the report. John, welcome, and please begin your presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm here this morning to request the Billing and Operating Committee recommend to the Board of Directors approve the following actions relative to contract number 2022 B43, aluminum clip fabrication for suspension bridge sound reduction project as follows. Approve award of contract to Rush Company Energy Specialists of Fort Worth, Texas, in the amount of $488,862.81, and establish a contingency for this contract in the amount of $48,886, equal to 10% of the contract award amount, with the understanding that sufficient funds are available in the Bridge Division operating budget to finance these actions. So as part of the ongoing Golden Gate Bridge physical suicide deterrent system and wind retrofit projects, the construction contractor has installed the wind retrofit elements on the west side of the suspension span. And the wind retrofit includes replacement of the original railing on the west side, which had wide pickets, with a new railing that has thin pickets. Also included the installation of a wind fairing on the west side. And as we've reported previously, as the work progressed, the bridge began emanating some sounds during some high velocity wind events. On June 5th, during a period of very high winds, the wind that came from the bridge were heard from a long distance away, in addition to at the bridge itself. As was previously reported, in October, November 2020 and June 2021, wind tunnel tests were commissioned by the district, and they were performed on full-scale new bridge railing specimens. And based on those results, it was determined that installing 1/16 inch thick tapered U-shaped clips, alternating orientation, with 1/16 inch thick vibration rubber damping material on both sides of the pickets for the full length of the suspension bridge would be the most effective measure to reduce this sound. At the December 17, 2021 Board of Directors meeting, approval was given for the following actions. So approval of the installation of the clips and the vibration damping material on both sides for the full length of the main span of the suspension bridge. Approval of a project in the fiscal year 2021 from the Bridge Operating Division budget with an estimated cost of $450,000, and authorization to file a notice of exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act for the suspension bridge sound reduction project. After that approval, the district developed contract number 2022 B43, aluminum clip fabrication for suspension bridge sound reduction project, for the fabrication and delivery of these aluminum clips, which involves the following: construction of a die to extrude the clips to the shape specified, furnishing aluminum and paint materials, providing color samples and adjusting the paint to match the bridge railing, fabricating and coating 25 pre-production clips to make sure that they work, then fabricating 26,000 production clips and shipping all of these to the toll plaza. Also on December 20th, 2021, the district did file the notice of exemption under CEQA in both San Francisco and Marin counties. On March 15th, 2022, we solicited documents for the procurement of these clips. We sent out courtesy emails to a number of people, solicitation several times in San Francisco Chronicle. 15 firms downloaded the solicitation documents, but by the bid opening date of April 6th, no bids were received. So we immediately re-advertised the solicitation, and we advertised some more and reached out some more. And on the bid opening date of April 26th, we were able to receive one bid, which was open and read publicly. That was from Rushco Energy Specialists from Fort Worth, Texas, again, in the amount of $488,862.81. The procurement, the bid was reviewed by the Procurement and Engineering Department, by the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program Administrator and attorneys, and it was determined that it was complete and in conformance with the bid solicitation requirements. We also performed a cost analysis of the pricing from Rushco because it was a little higher than what we estimated. And we believe that due to adjustments from the time that we originally estimated and the increase in pricing for all commodities, that the pricing for the work is fair and reasonable. We also reached out to a number of firms that did not submit bids to ask if there was a particular reason, and received responses such as they were just too busy, they weren't interested because the quantity wasn't large enough, or they were not familiar with the bid solicitation process that we have on our website. But none were related to the specifications being too restrictive or limiting competition. There was no contract-specific DBE or small business enterprise goal. However, the prime does have a sub that they're going to be using for this fabrication, who is a DBE certified sub. So approximately 82% DBE participation is anticipated for the performance of this contract. So engineering staff and the attorney have determined that Rushco Energy Specialists, with the bid price of $488,862.81, is the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, and recommends award of contract 2022B 043 to Rushco Energy Specialists. It's also recommended that a contingency in the amount of $48,886 or 10% be established in the event that any unforeseen circumstances arrive during fabrication. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, John, for your presentation. Are there any questions or comments from directors at this time?
Madam Chair, this is Director Hernandez. May I make a comment?
Please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much to our District Engineer, John, for your report. Just had a couple of comments. I wanted to thank you very much for your comprehensive report, and especially for making the extra effort to evaluate the reasons why the numbers of bidders were so low. It's always a little bit uncomfortable for me. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it is uncomfortable to award a contract or approve a contract when there's been so little competition. And I realize there are lots of challenges that present themselves now that contribute to why that is more the case with the effects of COVID, et cetera, et cetera. It's hard to get employees, various reasons. But you noted 3 items in your in what you were able to obtain in terms of feedback for why people didn't bid, too busy, too small a contract. But the third one is something that we have a little bit of control over here at the district. And just as a general comment, I wanted to say thank you to the district, to the staff for prioritizing efforts to do whatever we can to help educate prospective bidders for our contracts, and also just to continue that work and to enhance it in any reasonable ways, given that the challenges on the outside that we don't have control over are so grave these days. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you again to the engineering staff, and please keep up the good work and enhance it where possible to encourage more bidders to come forward. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Sabrina. Is anyone else comment or question?
I see a hand up. President Theriault has a hand up.
Yeah.
I was wondering if the raise hand feature would work. There it is. So just a quick question. Do they get to keep the die for extrusion at the end of their fabrication? Or do we get to lay hands on it and have it available for, a potentially future replacement bid? I realize they probably want to keep the die to have possession of the inside track on a future replacement bid, but that's my question.
The contract is silent on that. However, we are paying for them actually making this die. So I would think if we requested that die, we'd be able to receive that.
Okay. Thanks for asking that question, Mike. Wonderful. That concludes discussion on item number 3. But before we take our vote, is there anyone from the public, Amaret, wishing to speak on this item?
We have no speakers on item 3.
Thank you. Colleagues, may I have a motion on agenda item number 3 to approve actions relative to award of contract number 2022B043?
Madam Chair, I'll move the item.
Thank you, Jerry. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Great, thank you. Thank you, and Madam Secretary, please do a roll call vote.
Thank you. We're voting on item number 3 with a first and second, starting with Director Arnold, who's absent. Director Conroy.
Aye.
Thank you. Director Garbarino.
Aye.
Director Giudice is absent. Director Grosval.
Aye.
Director Hernandez.
Aye.
Director Maston.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Director Melgar is absent. Director Parr.
Aye.
Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Director Rodoni.
Aye.
Director Snyder is absent. Director Stephanie is absent. Director Thier.
Yes.
Second Vice President Hill.
Yes.
And let's see, First Vice President Cochran
Yes.
and President Terrio.
Yes.
Thank you. You have 12 ayes.
Thank you, and that motion passes. We will now move on to agenda item number 4 to approve actions relative to award of contract number 2021B052 Golden Gate Bridge Toll Plaza Administration Building Elevator Repairs and Improvements. The staff report begins on page 7, and John will also be presenting this item. John, please go ahead with your report.
Thank you. Good morning all again. So with this item here, we're here to request that the Building and Operating Committee recommend that the Board of Directors award or approve the following actions relative to the award of contract number 2021 B052 Golden Gate Bridge Toll Plaza Administration Building Elevator Repairs and Improvements as follows. Authorize award of contract number 2021 B52 to Trico Construction, San Francisco, in the amount of $726,613. Establish a construction contingency for the contract in the amount of $109,000, which is equal to 15% of the contract amount. And authorize an increase in the amount of $944,000 in the fiscal year 2021-22 Bridge Division capital budget for project number 2121 Toll Plaza Administration Building Elevator Replacement to be funded from district reserves for revised total project 2121 budget of $1,534,000. And if the recommendation goes through, this matter will be presented to the Finance Committee May 19th for concurrence in the Board of Directors on the 20th for appropriate actions. So the toll plaza at the Golden Gate Bridge Toll Plaza Administration Building was constructed in 1937 as part of the original construction. Originally, it was a single-story structure and provided office space for administrative staff involved with collecting tolls and providing security and administration of the Golden Gate Bridge. The building currently is the location of the district manager, the secretary of the district, auditor, controller, district engineer offices, bridge security, accounting, capital, and grants offices, and engineering staff. It's also the primary meeting location for the Board of Directors. Again, the original building was a one-story steel frame structure. And in 1965, the second story was added. At that time, a 3-stop elevator was added to provide access from the basement to the first and second floors. The elevator is the in-ground hydraulic piston type, operates inside of a cylinder that's embedded in the ground underneath the elevator pit. The elevator has been regularly maintained, but in 2019 and 2020, the hydraulic system began experiencing some breakdowns requiring repairs and service. The elevator service firm informed the district that the lift system itself was failing and would require some major refurbishing, including replacing the in-ground hydraulic piston. And that was beyond the scope of the maintenance agreement. In 2021, during an inspection by the State of California Division of Occupational Safety and Health, elevator unit, it was determined that the elevator was no longer fit to operate and was required to be repaired or decommissioned. And since the repairs were extensive and could not be readily made, the elevator itself was decommissioned on November 15, 2021. Engineering staff then developed a construction contract number 2021 B52, to accomplish elevator repairs, which involved the following. Drilling into the ground under the elevator shaft to accommodate a new larger cylinder and piston, removing and disposing contaminated soil, removing and replacing the existing passenger elevator hydraulic power and control systems, making improvements to the hoisting system and the elevator car, including cab interior, cab door, and hallways, constructing a new fire-rated elevator machine room with a new mechanical ventilation system, and then performing necessary electrical installations and connections, installing current code requirements for fire detection, fire alarm systems, and performing a full load testing upon completion of the repairs. In March, as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, staff working on site and vendors that had access to the building were required to follow state and county public health guidelines regarding masking and social distancing. This condition still exists, and during the project construction, the building will remain partially occupied, and the construction work will be staged to facilitate our district operations. The contractor will also be required to comply with San Francisco Public Health and County and OSHA guidelines during construction related to COVID-19. The construction contract was advertised on March 22nd, 2022. It's advertised in newspapers and sent out to a number of small business enterprises. 14 firms downloaded the package. On April 26th, the following 3 bids were received and publicly open. Gallieri, doing business as Trico Construction, an amount of $726,613. W.E. Lyons Construction Company, the amount of $890,650. CWS Construction Group in the amount of $965,000. Engineering staff, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program Administrator, and attorney all evaluated the bids and determined that they were all complete. An SBE contract specific goal of 13% was established for the contract, and bidders were required to document their activities soliciting for such SBE subcontractors. The Disadvantaged Business Program Administrator determined that Trico Construction has complied with the DBE SBE program requirements applicable to this contract. Trico is a small business enterprise and has committed to subcontract with another small business enterprise firm. And at this time, the SBE participation of approximately 40.3% is anticipated. Engineering staff reviewed the bid proposals for completeness and conformance with the solicitation and determined that Trico Construction complied with the requirements. We also performed a cost analysis of the bid comparing to our updated staff estimate covering the increased construction scope of work, which I'll describe below, and the previous projects with similar work. Staff has determined that Trico Construction pricing for the work is fair and reasonable. Engineering staff and the attorney have determined that Trico Construction with the bid price of $726,613 is the lowest responsive and responsible bidder and recommends award of the contract 2021 B52 to Trico Construction. It's also recommended that a contingency in the amount of $109,000 or 15% of the construction contract total price be established for contract 2021 B52 in the event of unforeseen circumstances arising during construction, especially during drilling of the larger shaft underneath the elevator cab. So some background on the scope of work. This project was originally included in the, or is included in the 2021 capital project budget in an estimated amount of $590,000, which included approximately $400,000 for construction costs and approximately $190,000 for staff and design. The project was originally developed in March of 2022 and was based on a scope that included replacing the elevator hydraulic pump and in-ground cylinder, installing new operator panel, refurbishing the car and the doors, the flooring and paneling, and minor electrical work associated with the new panel. Staff anticipated that at that time that design could be completed with in-house resources. But since then, as work progressed, the project evolved into a more complex undertaking and required an expansion of the design and the construction scope. With regard to the increased scope of design, after investigating the various elevator code requirements, we determined that a consulting firm specializing in elevator renovations and refurbishments had to be retained to define the scope for the elevator repairs that complied with all elevator code requirements and to assist in developing contract specifications for the repairs. So engineering staff and the consultant performed a study to determine if an alternate lift not requiring drilling could be utilized at the building, but determined that due to space constraints and the building configuration, renovation of the existing system was best. The consultant also reviewed the existing system and informed staff that the current system did not have a separate fire-rated elevator equipment room, which is required by code to house the elevator hydraulic fluid tanks and controls. And it also informed us that the room must be ventilated. So staff reviewed the basement floor and determined that an existing storage area in the building could be renovated for this elevator machine room. Since it had to be ventilated, we had to retain services of a mechanical engineer to develop that ventilation system. We also hired an electrical engineer to assist with the design of the electrical works necessary to support the ventilation system and the elevator system components requiring power and assistance with developing elevator fire safety requirements. It was also determined that the currently utilized in-ground elevator cylinders and pistons are larger in diameter than the existing cylinders, and that's because they're now double-walled and the existing one is single-walled. So this necessitates adding drilling into the ground under the elevator shaft to enlarge the hole. After review of the elevator maintenance records, it was determined that some of the hydraulic fluid had leaked out of the cylinder and piping into the underlying soil. This is going to require removal and special disposal of the contaminated soil. So consequently, the following work was added to the construction contract: the remodeling of the fire-rated elevator equipment room, installation of the equipment in the room, and the ventilation system in the room. Also some electrical work to support that ventilation system, drilling of a larger hole, and the contaminated soil removal and disposal. It's also anticipated that the increased scope of construction work and the anticipated increased lead time to procure the equipment and material under current market conditions requires a construction time of 9 months, an additional effort of managing the construction contract. All of these led to the increase in the cost as noted above. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, John, for that extremely comprehensive report. Thank you so much. Are there any questions or comments from directors at this time? That's how comprehensive the report was.
We do have a hand up. Director Terrio has his hand up.
Go ahead.
I managed to use that thing again. I'm getting good. A couple questions. Trico is a general contractor, as I understand it.
That's correct.
Have they named their subs? That's the first question. Second question, and this concerns supply chain. Do we know who's manufacturing the appropriate cylinders, et cetera? And does then the sourcing of that become a potential, you've implied it might, hazard to the time frame of the repair?
So the first question, so Trico, yes, is a prime, and we did do some research on them. They currently have projects ongoing at San Francisco International Airport, where they're doing some elevator and escalator repair projects. And I actually reached out to the project manager at SFO, who's on that project, and received a good review from this company. We did receive, with the bids, the list of their subcontractors. And Otis Elevator, who is actually our current elevator service contract, and who also installed the original elevator, is their listed sub to do the elevator repairs. So we feel confident that Otis is going to be able to do these repairs. We did not see who the fabricator is of this, but that was not required as part of the bid proposal. But we're hopeful that since Otis is the listed subcontractor, that this will be they won't have an issue getting that. However, supply chain is a concern. That's why this is a 9-month project. So we're, again, we haven't heard yet that that's insufficient amount of time, but it will have some lead time on those components.
Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns?
Director Hernandez has her hand up.
Thank you. Go ahead, Sabrina.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question was answered. Thank you.
Welcome. That concludes discussion on item number 4, but before we take our vote, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item, Amaret?
We do. Mr. Pilpel would like to comment on this item as well. So Mr. Pilpel, are you still with us?
I am.
We hear you loud and clear. Go ahead.
Excellent. Okay, David Pilpel again. So on this item, thank you for including more history in not just this, but other staff reports. I appreciate the background and history. I still think that maps and photos would be a good thing to add where relevant. On this item, I would have included the background and then the scope that's at the end, and finally the instant contract and the fiscal impact. As I read through the contract bit, it suggested things about scope, and then the scope thing was at the end. So just the sequence of it was a little confusing to me, but all the content was there. It was comprehensive, all of that, got that. Again, I would have included a map and photos of the existing elevator and possibly the basement space that's at issue here. I understand there may be security reasons not to, but at least, you know, it's always good to have photos of the admin building. If this is a 9-month construction contract, does that mean that public meetings can't happen in person at the building for another 9 months or so? Is that the practical impact due to the ADA impacts relative to meetings? Just wondering. And finally, I support the elevator repair and improvement project and support the actions as proposed by staff. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Pilpel. Thank you. Colleagues, may I have a motion on agenda item number 4 to approve actions relative to award of contract number 2021B052?
So move, Parr.
Thank you, Barbara. May I have a second, please?
Second, Rabbit.
Thank you, David. Madam Secretary, please do a roll call vote.
Thank you. We're voting on item number 4 with the first and second, starting with Director Arnold, who's absent. Director Conroy.
Aye.
Director Garbarino.
Aye.
Director Giudice. Is absent. Director Grosball.
I'm an aye, but once the vote's over, could we get an answer to David's question about the meeting, no meetings for 9 months? Thank you.
Thank you. Director Hernandez.
Aye.
Director Mastin.
Aye.
Director Melgar. Is absent. Director Parr.
Aye.
Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Director Rodoni.
Aye.
Director Snyder is absent. Director Stephanie is also absent. Director Thier.
Yes.
Second Vice President Hill.
Yes.
First Vice President Cochran.
Yes.
And President Terrio.
Yes.
Thank you. You have 12 ayes.
Thank you. The motion passes. We will move on to agenda item number 5 to approve actions relative to a hydrogen fuel cell ferry demonstration project. The staff report begins on page 13, and Dennis will present this report. Dennis, please begin your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, and I'll answer David Pilpel and Director Grosball's question first. And until we have an elevator, we will not have public meetings at this location. It doesn't mean we can't have public meetings. The district secretary's done extensive outreach to explore alternative locations. So when it's appropriate for us to meet in person, that we'll have alternative locations that are accessible to transit where we can meet.
Thank you.
Moving to agenda item number 5, the item before you seeks your approval and your recommendation to the Board of Directors to participate in a unique opportunity to be a partner with the San Francisco Bay Area Water Emergency Transportation Authority, or WETA, on a 6-month demonstration project utilizing a hydrogen fuel cell ferry on San Francisco Bay. A couple of years ago, the Board of Directors adopted a climate emergency declaration, And as the district achieves those objectives, we're transitioning to cleaner and cleaner technologies on our buses and ferries to reduce our emissions, ultimately leading to a zero emission future. With respect to opportunities for technology, a zero emission ferry will have electric motors on it, and it will have either batteries to store electricity, or it will have a hydrogen fuel cell that converts hydrogen into electricity to propel it. The first such hydrogen fuel cell ferry is being built and actually going through sea trials right now. And it was developed by a private equity firm with funding also from the public sector, the California Air Resources Board. The vessel is called the Sea Change. WIDA has secured the right to lease and operate that vessel for a period of 6 months in San Francisco Bay for a real world demonstration of the technology. There are lots of questions with respect to particularly fueling and the cycling of fueling, how long it takes, and how well the vessel performs. The vessel has a capacity of 70 passengers and a cruising speed of 11 knots. So it's not an appropriate vessel for our ferry routes, nor most WIDA routes. However, WIDA has worked with Switch Marine to develop a service contract to test the technology on the bay, supplementing WIDA service. The estimated cost for the 6 months demonstration is $1.8 million. That cost includes leasing the vessel, berthing, fuel, and crew costs. WIDA is getting money from outside private partners as well as their own contributions to it. The item before you contemplates a $300,000 participation from the Bridge District in this $1.8 million demonstration project. The Sea Change will operate 8 hours a day, 7 days a week along the waterfront, and it will provide an opportunity to highlight this cutting-edge marine application of hydrogen fuel cell technology to build public awareness. And the district will also have the opportunity to run it on some of our routes, not in perhaps passenger service, but just to explore the technology. And of course, we'll invite all of you to participate in that. So the item before you contemplates a $300,000 contribution to this $1.8 million demonstration project that will allow us to learn more about this technology as we transition to a greener future. And with that, I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Dennis, thanks for your presentation. Are there any questions or comments from directors on this item? Barb, go ahead. And then Bert.
Thank you. This question either for the general manager or for Mr. Swindler. I appreciated the breakdown of the costs. I'll have to tell you that I didn't understand. I mean, I understood what they were, but it was eye-opening to see what the actual breakdown of how much it costs and where the money goes when you are running a ferry. Just for comparison, what do you know what a 6-month cost, the total cost of running one of our current ferries is? And I understand that it's not exactly the same because of the number of passengers and the timing and all of that. But do we have a comparison at all?
It's really not a fair comparison. This is a 70-passenger vessel. You know, our smaller vessels have a capacity of more than 400 passengers.
Right, I understand
also,
that.
and our slowest vessel is 26 knots. But the fuel costs are actually quite high for this, but that's typical for new technology before it's widely developed. So the fuel costs are high for this, which is not unexpected. It's similar to operating an electric bus today. The fuel cost for the 2 electric buses that we operate from Marin Transit is several times per mile of what we pay for diesel to operate a similar bus. But part of this is just to learn about it and what is the actual fuel consumption. And so, you know, that's one of the things we'll learn as part of this. But we're in an expensive business. You know, a vessel that we operate may have a crew of 5. Before the pandemic, we spent $6 million a year on fuel in our ferry division, to give you a sense of scale. But for a 6-month demonstration project, we think it's prudent to participate at the level of $300,000 to be able to explore this technology with WIDA, to have some of our mechanics go in the engine room and work with them, to have some of our crew on the vessel at times, just to see how it operates. But I don't have a breakdown for you for the costs to operate our boats for 6 months at this time, but I can get that for you.
No, that's all right. You don't have to do that. I think the information you gave me was enough to help me get my head around it. Thank you.
Great, Bert.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very excited about participating in this project. I think it's a great step forward in our movement to find zero emission projects. I am ultimately concerned at the end how the hydrogen is produced as being a factor in determining what it is doing relative to climate change. But that's far from now. Experimenting with this project, I think, is really great, Dennis. And I compliment you for going into it this time.
Thank you, Director Hill. Just for your colleagues' sake, zero emission refers to from the bus or the ferry boat, but it gets into how the energy is generated. And you could have an electric bus that you operate in LA, but if it's getting charged from electricity from a coal-fired power plant in Arizona, it's not green. But the key is to learn the technology. Hydrogen, like other forms of electricity, can be very clean or very dirty. If it's developed not through natural gas, but if it's developed through water and high energy usage from renewable sources such as wind, it can be extremely green. That's an issue for future phases, but I appreciate you highlighting it, Director Hill, because we always want to be cognizant of the fact that how you get your electricity is a very, very important part of this equation.
Great. Anyone else? Thank you, Dennis.
Director Thier has her hand up.
Great. Thank you, Holly. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Garbarino. I just wanted to say to Director Mulligan and to all the staff that this is exactly the type of creative project that will move the district forward with respect to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and addressing the climate emergency. Having a demonstration project with a hydrogen fuel cell technology will not only give our workers experience with this type of technology, but also will build awareness throughout the region about public and private efforts that we could perhaps see in the future. Although this specific boat, as I understand it, I don't believe it carries enough passengers for our district. Doing this demonstration project is exactly what we need to be doing. And I really want to take a moment to commend Dennis Mulligan and staff in creating this and finding it, and also partnering with WIDA.
Great. Thank you, Holly. Anyone else? Seeing none, that concludes our discussion on item number 5. Before we take our vote, is there anyone from the public, Amaret, wishing to speak on this item?
Mr. Pilpel may have a comment, so I'm going to just check in with him. David, are you on the line?
I am. I did have a late thought on this.
Okay, go ahead. I know you were a maybe, but that's why I figured I'd call on you. Go ahead, David. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, I read the staff report. I support the demonstration, but I'm not very clear on the service concept. And if there are fares and schedules for passengers, or if those are still being developed. Sounds like it might just sort of wander around the waterfront during the day. Not sure if it's actually carrying people. Perhaps DGM Swindler could explain that briefly, if you might ask. And I'm just wondering if there are any anticipated labor or liability issues with district participation with this service. Just kind of thinking. Okay, anyway, thanks.
I'll answer that. The service is still evolving, working with WIDA. They are looking at potentially using it for Treasure Island service. It's a very short trip, so an 11-knot speed is not problematic, but they'll also do shuttles along the waterfront. I'd be remiss to add, particularly in light of last night's game, that one of the private sector partners contributing money to this is the Golden State Warriors. So we have good company. But at this time, it's still evolving, but it will be put in passenger fare service. They will collect fares. And the liability we have for a crew on a vessel is the same whether it's on our boat or someone else's boat. And so we have insurance that covers those matters, as well as our self-insured retention. So it's not a concern.
Great. Thank you, David, for your
follow-up. Perhaps
Go ahead.
Perhaps the sea change will be paired with another boat in the future, the MS Stephen Curry. But thanks again.
Oh, good. Well, great. At the risk of getting a technical, like happened last night over somebody expressing their personal emotional feelings, I would like to thank Dennis again and my colleagues. And before, I'd like to piggyback, if I could, on what Holly had said. I'm very proud of the district for going forward in this fashion, especially since some of us got to attend Waste Expo last week, which is our industry convention, which needs a new name desperately. But the push for electric vehicles is somewhat unrealistic at this time. Hopefully it will continue, but that was a theme at Waste Expo. So we too are looking at putting in biomass technology here and have it in our plans for development to operate our fleet. So again, I'm very proud of the district. Colleagues, may I have a motion on agenda item number 5 to approve a hydrogen cell ferry demonstration project?
So moved.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Madam Secretary, please do a roll call vote.
Thank you. We have a first and seconds for item number 5, starting with Director Arnold, who's absent. Director Conroy. Director Conroy?
Aye.
Thank you. Director Garbarino?
Enthusiastically, aye.
Director Giudice is absent. Director Grosball?
Aye.
Thank you. Director Hernandez?
Aye.
Director Maston?
It's a great opportunity. Aye.
Thank you. Director Melgar is absent. Director Parr?
Aye.
Director Rabbit?
Aye.
Director Verdoni?
Aye.
Director Snyder is absent. Director Stephanie is absent. Director Thier?
Enthusiastically, aye.
Second Vice President Hill?
Aye.
First Vice President Cochran?
Yes.
And President Tirio?
I will note that Clay Thompson pilots his own boat to work, so maybe there's a future skipper. And yes.
Okay, thank you.
He's
You have
bulldog.
12 ayes.
Oh, good. Thank you. The motion passes. We will continue to agenda item number 6 to approve actions relative to contract number 2022-D046, software maintenance for INIT software. The staff report begins on page 17 and Kelly Hopper will be presenting this report. Kelly, please begin your presentation.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm bringing an item to you today that actually has 3 components to it. It's seeking your approval for a maintenance and support contract to a sole source agreement with Init Innovations for a 3-year term with no option years. Second is to authorize the general manager in future years to approve the maintenance and support contract for this vendor if necessary for this work. And then finally is a contingency equal to 5% of the contract amount in the event to address any emerging new technologies or needs that are would be needed for this system. Is just a way of background. Init is our CAD AVL system in our bus division. It really is the backbone of our operations. In many respects, it probably touches most, if not all of our systems in terms of dispatch, daily operations, communications, preventative maintenance, monitoring, system monitoring, things like that. So it's vital that we have this system up and running. It's been in place for several years. Back in 2019, we came to this committee and asked for a maintenance and support contract. And at the time, the committee asked that we do a little bit of research of whether Init was our long-term solution for our system. Because at the time we were out of support level of our senior level support level. In the interim, we have actually upgraded. The Init system is now upgraded and we're getting regular upgrades. So the system is very vital and it's actually functioning quite well. So moving forward, we typically have over the last several years is when we brought contracts like this, we've asked that the maintenance and service component of the contracts in future years be under the authority and the delegation of the general manager. And so we're asking that that be in place for this contract as well, moving forward after the 3-year term. And then finally is a contingency equal to 5%. And this is just basically to ensure rapid response in the event that there's some emerging needs that come out of bus, or if there's some new technologies the district might want to embrace that's associated with this with this program. And this funding is available in the appropriate fiscal year budget, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kelly, for your presentation. Are there any questions or comments from directors on item number 6? Great report. Okay, seeing none, that concludes our discussions on the item. Before we take our vote, is there anyone, Amoret, from the public wishing to speak on this item?
We have no speakers on this item.
Thank you. Colleagues, may I have a motion on agenda item number 6 to approve actions relative to award of contract number 2022D046?
Madam Chair, I'll move the item.
Thank you, Jerry.
Second, Rabbit.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please do a roll call vote.
Thank you. We're voting on item number 6 with the first and second, starting with Director Arnold, who's absent, Director Conroy,
Aye.
Director Garbarino,
Aye.
Director Giudice is absent, Director Grosball,
Aye.
Director Hernandez,
Aye.
Director Maston,
Aye.
Director Milgar is absent, Director Parr,
Aye.
Director Rabbit,
Aye.
Director Rodoni,
Aye.
Director Snyder is absent, Director Stephanie is absent, Director Thier,
Aye.
Second Vice President Hill,
Yes.
First Vice President Cochran,
Yes.
and President Tiria.
Yes.
Thank you. You have 12 ayes.
Thank you, and that motion passes. We will now move on to agenda item number 7 to authorize execution of professional services agreement relatives to request for proposals number 2021D077, Cisco and VMware professional services. The staff report begins on page 19, and Kelly will also be presenting this report. Kelly, please begin your presentation.
Thank you. We're asking for the committee to approve a recommendation to authorize a professional services agreement with 5 vendors for on-call consulting, often what we refer to as our bench consultants. And this is in the area of providing us, as Madam Chair said, our Cisco and our VMware support. This started back in about 2017. The district recognized the need to have rapid response in our technology. And part of that was Cisco and VMware is to be able to have consultants that were able to come on and provide the services that we would need, and we wouldn't have to do individual contracts for each of them. So that started back in 2017, and it's been very successful. It's to meet the needs of the organization as they change. Any updates that occur, particularly in the areas of, for cybersecurity and things like that, as we have going forward, as well as you can imagine with anything, there's frequent maintenance of our various components and systems. So we are issuing the new RFP. We sent out the bids to 594 prospective proposers. Let me explain a little bit about that, because that's a large number. In our bonfire is vendors are set up, or potential proposers are set up by codes. And we really tried to get the widest net possible to try to solicit as many proposers as we could. And for instance, this is a professional services, but under the codes, we included people that may provide not only professional services, but goods. And so we tried to really blanket and get a really wide net. Subsequently, we received 6 bids, and the selection committee went through that. And based on that, the top 5 that were rated is listed in the staff report. These are, the DBE said there were no proposed small businesses that were associated with this, but these are vital for the ongoing operations of all of our various systems here at the district. And I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Kelly, thank you again for your presentation. A good one. Are there any questions or comments from directors at this time? Okay, seeing none, that concludes discussion on item number 7. Before we take our vote, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item, Amoret?
We have no speakers on this item.
Thank you. Colleagues, may I have a motion on agenda item number 7 to authorize execution of professional services agreements relative to RFP number 2021D077?
So moved, Rabbit.
Thank you, David. May I have a second?
Second, Cochran.
Madam Secretary, please do a roll call vote.
Thank you. We're voting on item number 7 with the first and second, starting with Director Arnold, who's absent, Director Conroy,
Aye.
Director Garbarino,
Aye.
Director Giudice is absent, Director Grosboll,
Aye.
Director Hernandez,
Aye.
Director Maston,
Aye.
Director Milgar is absent, Director Parr,
Aye.
Director Rabbit,
Aye.
Director Rodoni,
Aye.
Director Snyder is absent, Director Stephanie is absent, Director Thier,
Aye.
Second Vice President Hill,
Yes.
First Vice President Cochran,
Yes.
and President Terrio.
Yes.
Thank you. You have 12 ayes.
Thank you. The motion passes. We will move on to item number 8 on the agenda, an informational monthly report from board appointees on the Sonoma Marin Area Rail Transit Board. A brief staff report is on page 23, and I would like to report. We'll go to my notes here. We have 2 meetings. I have 2 meetings to report on, and I'm praying that my colleagues, Barbara and David, can help shore me up. The meeting on May 4, the highlights of which are the listening sessions, a data analysis of the listening sessions, obviously information coming from the public is coming forward, and we will have some additional information back at our next meeting in May, or actually at the beginning of June. Ridership is 53% of recovered from pre-COVID averages. Sundays numbers are actually growing quite a bit as well. Park and ride is free now, so that I believe has also helped to increase our ridership. And we're looking to reach out further to the transit, tourist market. I do take notes. So in addition to that, speaking of ridership, SMART proposes to add 10 weekday trips beginning Monday, June 13th, bringing weekday scheduled trips to 36. From our meeting of May 18th, yesterday, once again, average weekday ridership is up from the post-COVID numbers, with adults specifically up 36%. One of the marketing, tourist marketing that I mentioned from the earlier report is to highlight Muir Woods and a trip to Muir Woods. And we had a wonderful video about several people, including this adorable 13-year-old. It was his birthday, and he was going from, I'm not sure where, all the way on SMART, on the ferry to the Giants game. And he was thrilled about that and his new phone. So the Muir Woods trips will begin, or connectivity will begin July. And we had a report as well from the general manager on community outreach efforts, and also on freight. A cleanup of which includes the tankers that have been parked at Shellville being removed and cleaned up there. Also was included the increased freight costs and just a general update on performing freight. In addition to that, yesterday we received a fiscal year draft budget report from our CFO, Heather McKillop. Finally, and I can forward this to Amaret for your distribution, there's a far better report that is provided by our GM, Eddie Cummings, to us after each of the meetings, and I'm happy to forward that information. And I'm just wondering if Barb or David, if you have anything additional, and I should mention that David runs a great meeting. Thank you. Great. So hearing no additional input, I get a pass on that. And are there any board members who have comments or questions regarding the SMART report? And just let us know if you want a copy of
I
Eddie.
see President Terrio has his hand up.
Mike?
Thanks. So I'm aware of a Muir Woods shuttle that leaves from the north end of Sausalito. That obviously doesn't work with SMART. Where's yours take off from?
Well, I would assume it's going to take off from the terminus of the SMART train in Larkspur, but I don't know specifically, and I'll look to my colleagues. I see Dennis is nodding his head.
Yeah, that's what the report was, that it will replace the one that's currently there.
Okay.
And it'll go right to the ferry terminus.
So
So,
we're in discussions with Marin Transit, who operates the Muirwood shuttle, which is a valuable service, get lots of cars off of the road,
Right.
Southern Marin, particularly Southwestern Marin. And so we'll be signing a license agreement with them to allow them on holidays and weekends to operate out of the Larkspur Ferry Terminal. We have ample available parking even before the pandemic on weekends and holidays there. It's kind of a nice synergy because the train comes together. And so we're kind of making that more of a transit hub, if you wish. So you'll still be able to catch a shuttle from Sausalito, but they'll not be picking up at the Pahono lot. With this transition, they'll instead tell people that are driving to think about not driving, taking a boat, a bus, or a train, but that if you drive, there will be parking at the ferry terminal in Larkspur.
Thank you.
okay,
Bob.
so I don't mean to throw a wrench in any of this, but one thing we learned at SMART was when we waived the parking fees, our ridership increased. Just something to think about.
Well, there you have it. Thank you, Barb. Thank you, Dennis Mulligan. And I saw a nod from Dennis Verdoni. Dennis, do you have anything to add? You're all good.
No, Dennis covered it all.
Cool. Okay. That then concludes discussion on item number 8. But before we move on, is there anyone from the public, Amaret, wishing to speak on this item?
We have no speakers on this item.
Thank you. No action is required for item number 8, so we will move on to item number 9. The status report on engineering projects begins on page 25, and we will welcome back John Eberly to present this report. John, go right ahead and proceed with your informational report.
Yes, hi, good morning. The engineer's report is included in your packet, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, colleagues. Are there any reports for John or any questions for John on the engineering report? Seeing none, there is no action associated with item number 9 once again. Is there anyone from the public, Amaret, wishing to speak on this item or address the committee under item number 10, which is public comment?
We have no further speakers.
Okay, thank you. We've reached, through God's grace, the end of this agenda. May I have a motion to adjourn this meeting? Y'all want to stay in this meeting?
So moved, and thank you, Patty.
Great. Is there?
Second.
Cool. Okay. Hearing no objections, this concludes the meeting of the Building and Operating Committee. Thank you very much, colleagues. The time is 10:31.
Thank you. Chair
Thanks,
Rabbit,
Patty.
if you would like, we can break for 5 minutes before we start again, or if you like, we can roll right into things. So I'll leave it up to you.
Well, I'll leave it up to my colleagues. Either way.
5 minutes.
break.
Okay,
5
5 minutes.
All right,
Final
5
break.
minutes.
Ariette, are you still on? I don't know what happened, but while Patty was talking, everything froze and then all of a sudden I was off the Zoom. Can you tell that, or is that just me?
No, the only thing I saw, honestly, was I saw your screen blacked out.
Yeah, mine too, on this
Yeah.
end.
And
Okay,
then we saw you return.
right. I don't know how, it just happened. Thank you.
All right, Chair Rabbit, 10:37.
All right, you tell, we're good to go?
We are ready to go. We are live still and we're all connected.
Well, great. It is 10:37 a.m. and I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Finance Auditing Committee of Thursday, May 19th, 2022. Before we begin, please note this meeting is live streamed on YouTube and is being recorded. Members of the public are encouraged to watch and listen on the meeting on YouTube. But if you would like to provide public comment at today's meeting, and if you haven't done so already, please call 415-569-6446 and let the facilitator know what items you would like to speak on today. Thanks to those who stayed with us through the morning. And Madam Secretary, can you please call the roll?
Thank you. We're going to start with Director Cochran.
Here.
Director Giudice.
Here.
Thank you. Director Grosball. Director Grosball, we see you. We see Director Grosball. He hasn't unmuted to say here, but I see you there. Okay, Director Hernandez.
Here.
Thank you. Director Maston.
Here.
Vice Chair Parr.
Here.
Chair Rabbit.
Here.
And President Tirio.
Here.
You are still a committee of the whole. You also have on the line Directors Garbarino, Hill, and Thier. And let's go to staff. Dennis Mulligan.
Here.
Great. Joe Wire.
Yes.
John Eberly.
Here.
Thank you. Kim Enolius.
Morning.
David Rivera.
Morning, President.
Thank you. Mona Babauta.
Present.
Jim Swindler.
Present.
And Kelly Hopper.
Present.
Thank you. That confirms staff on the line. We also have Ron Downing on the line, and I believe Jennifer Minucci will also be on the line shortly. And that confirms everyone on the line. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I want to remind everyone to mute their microphones until after the staff's presentations, and remember to unmute when we open it up for directors' discussion. If we have directors calling in by phone, please use your mute button or *6 to unmute yourself. And after staff's presentation, we'll be asking for any questions or comments on the item. Click on reactions or the raise hand feature on your computer if you have a question, or press *9 for the raised hand function if you're joining by phone. If there are any questions, Secretary I will call on you accordingly. If we missed your raised hand, please speak up. After our discussion, we will ask for any public comment before moving on. Please follow along by referring to the page numbers located on the bottom right-hand corner of your meeting packet. And Madam Secretary, can you please introduce the first item?
Thank you, Chair Rabbit. Item number 3 is ratification of previous actions by the Auditor Controller, and that packet of commitments, ratifications, and investments before you and begins on page 5. Leslie Murphy's not able to join us today to present her PFM report, but instead we have Joe Wire available to answer any questions directors may have.
Great. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns for Joe on item number 3? I am not seeing any hands raised. Madam Secretary, are you?
Not
All
seeing
right.
any as well.
Well, we appreciate that and appreciate the work that Leslie's and PFM has put forward. That will conclude that discussion. Before we take our vote, Madam Secretary, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak?
We have no speakers on this item.
Okay, so I'll ask my colleagues for a motion on item 3 to ratify the previous investments, authorize investments, and accept the investment report.
Mr. Chair, I'll move the motion.
Great. We have a motion and a second by?
Second.
Great. And with that, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Thank you. We're voting on item number 3 with the first and second, starting with Director Arnold, who's absent. Director Conroy is also absent. Director Garbarino.
Aye.
Director Giudice.
Yes.
Director Grosball.
Yes.
Director Hernandez.
Aye.
Director Maston.
Aye.
Director Milgar is absent. Director Parr.
Aye.
Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Director Rodoni is absent. Director Snyder is absent. Director Stephanie is absent. Director Thier.
Aye.
Thank you. Second Vice President Hill.
Yes.
First Vice President Cochran,
Yes.
and President Terrio.
Yes.
Thank you. You have 11 ayes.
Great, thank you very much, and that motion passes. Because what goes up must come down, we'll move on to item 4A to authorize a budget increase in the amount, or excuse me, in fiscal year 21-22, the Bridge Division Capital Project for project number 2121, the Golden Gate Bridge Toll Plaza Administration Building Elevator Replacement Project. The staff report begins on page 25. We just heard the presentation from John Eberly earlier this morning at the Building and Operating Committee meeting. If there are no further questions for staff, I'd like to continue. And are there any questions, comments, or concerns from directors on item 4A? I'm not seeing any hands raised. That concludes the discussion on this item. Before we take our vote, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on item 4A, Madam Secretary?
We have no speakers on this item.
Great. Can we then get a motion to approve item 4A, the elevator replacement project?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the item.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. And Madam Secretary, can you please do a roll call vote on that item?
Thank you. Voting on item 4A with the first and second, starting with Director Arnold, who's absent. Director Conroy is also absent. Director Garbarino.
Aye.
Director Giudice.
Yes.
Director Grosball.
You know, I've learned a lot about elevators today, which I appreciate. I'll vote for that.
Thank you. Director Hernandez.
Aye.
Director Maston.
Aye.
Director Milgar is absent. Director Parr.
My favorite was that there's something in the basement that none of us ever see. Yes.
Thank you. Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Director Radoni is absent. Director Snyder is absent. And Director Stephanie is absent. Director Thier.
Aye.
Second Vice President Hill.
Yes.
First Vice President Cochran.
Yes.
And President Terrio.
Yes.
Thank you. You have 11 ayes.
Great. Thank you all very much. I think we learned that elevators are expensive, especially when you have to retrofit an existing elevator shaft. So appreciate the work there and look forward to moving forward on that particular item. So that motion passes. We have no actions for item 5. So we'll move on to item number 6 to authorize execution of a joint exercise of powers agreement for processing parking citations in Marin County. The staff report for that one begins on page 29, and Bridge Manager Dave Rivera will present the report. So go ahead, Dave.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Rabbit and members of the committee. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I'm Dave Rivera, Deputy General Manager, Bridge Division. The recommendation before you is to authorize the execution of a joint exercise of powers agreement, also known as JEPA, for processing parking citations in Marin County. Let me provide a little background on this. In 1982, Marin County, cities and towns located in Marin County, Marin Municipal Water District, Marin Community College District, California Highway Patrol, and the California Department of Parks and Recreation entered into a JEPA agreement to process vehicle parking citations in Marin County. The district subsequently joined the agreement in 1986, and over the years, other entities have joined and withdrew from the agreement's membership. The current group of participating agency includes the district, the cities of Novato, Larkspur, Mill Valley, and Belvedere, the towns of San Anselmo, Corte Madera, Fairfax, Ross, and Tiburon, Marin County, and the Marin Community College District, the Marin Municipal Water District, and the CHP. The Marin County Sheriff's Office, which has been administering the agreement as the Marin Parking Authority, otherwise known as MPA, and then only contracts with a third-party vendor to process and collect payment for the participating agencies' parking citations. The parking agencies now wish to enter into an updated JEPA agreement to clarify and align certain procedures, roles, and responsibilities with the participating agencies' current practices and need to ensure uninterrupted citation processing operations. Marin County Sheriff's Office will continue to administer this agreement. The district currently utilizes the third-party vendor retained by participating agencies to process and collect payment for parking citations at the Larkspur Ferry Terminal. The district may use such services for other areas located in Marin, such as the San Rafael Transit Center and also Alexander Avenue in Sausalito. Staff has determined it is in the district's best interest to continue jointly contracting for parking citation processing services with participating agencies because a single parking citation processing vendor is convenient and economical. By executing the updated JEPA, the district will continue to work with the participating agencies to obtain parking citation processing services in an efficient and cost-saving manner. Staff recommendations is the board of directors authorize execution of this JEPA. And one of the things about this is there's no fiscal impact with this report. That is my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Dave. Love the fact that there's no fiscal impact. I'll look to my colleagues to see if there's any questions, comments, or concerns. And is that Director Maston, please?
Yeah. So, excuse me, who's the third-party vendor and is their contract being evaluated in this process?
So Marin Parking Authority, MPA, they use a company called, let me pull it up here. Sorry, drawing a blank right now. They use a company called Citation Processing Center, and we work with Marin County Sheriffs, and we go through them to basically administer it.
Okay, so we're not evaluating them in this process.
We're not evaluating them in this process.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions for Dave? Not seeing any. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to speak on this particular item?
Yes, we do have a speaker for item 6. David Pilpel would like to comment. David, are you there?
I am.
Go ahead. We hear you loud and clear.
Great, thanks. So on item 6 about the parking collection, I'm just wondering who represents the district on the JPA board, or however decisions are made there. And I'm also wondering, how are parking citations issued elsewhere on district property handled? For example, I assume that there are some citations issued at the Toll Plaza East parking lot. And anyway, this kind of presents a new and interesting area about parking citations on district property. I'm just wondering how those might be handled.
Hello, David. Thank you. That's a great question, and let me provide some answers on that. So for this agreement, the JEPA, it would be signed over by the general manager of the district, since it's in 3 different locations. As far as San Francisco, we work with San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency, SFMTA, for our parking citations, and the district works with them directly as far as when we issue out citations, and they are the lead party when they send them out. So I hope that answers that question.
Great, thank you, Dave. Madam Secretary, anyone else?
We have no other speakers.
Once again, bring it back to the board. Any final questions, comments, or concerns? And if not, can I get a motion to approve item 6?
So moved.
Sorry.
I think we had a motion and a second in there somewhere, Madam Secretary. Can you please call the roll for approval of item 6, the joint exercise agreement?
Got it. We'll pick up the first from Director Parr and a second from Director Giudice. So starting with Director Arnold, who's absent. Director Conroy is also absent. Director Garbarino.
Aye.
Director Giudice.
Yes.
Director Grosball.
Aye.
Director Hernandez.
Aye.
Director Meston.
Aye.
Director Milgar is absent. Director Parr.
Aye.
Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Director Rodoni is absent. Director Snyder is absent. Director Stephanie is absent. Director Thier.
Aye.
Second Vice President Hill.
Yes.
First Vice President Cochran.
Yes.
And President Tirio.
Yes.
Thank you. You have 11 ayes.
Great, thank you, Dave. That motion does pass. Next on the agenda is item number 7, to authorize execution of a 5th amendment to contract 2011-MD-1 with Brinks Inc. The staff report for that one begins on page 31, and Jennifer Minucci will be presenting this report. Jennifer, go ahead.
Good morning. I'm here to present the proposed execution of a 5th amendment for armored car services with Brinks Incorporated. The district uses Brinks for collecting and depositing cash for programs such as our transit fare boxes, our ticket vending machines, collection of parking meters. The district has had Brinks for services for a number of years, of which this last contract was implemented in 2010. In 2013, the district went to all electronic tolling. And so with the elimination of cash collection for tolling at the bridge, these services were reduced to cash collection, mainly for parking meters, our transit fare boxes, and our original ticket vending machines. In 2020, we came back to the board and asked for an extension for the Brinks contract because at the time we were planning to transition the transit revenue processing to the district's new ticket vending machine vendor. Unfortunately, during the contract negotiations earlier this year, the vendor was unable to have their subcontractor meet the district's needs for revenue processing. So we're here today to ask you to continue the revenue operations and collection of depositing cash and counting cash for transit and parking programs. So the ask is a 1-year extension with a year of monthly extensions while we look at the options. As we've heard earlier today, cash collection vendors have become limited in their resources and abilities, with many unwilling to perform some of the unique services the district needs, but we will be looking to explore the most efficient way to continue this revenue service. In particular, we in the transit side asked to pick up our transit vaults, which are quite large and they require a special vehicle with a large enough lift to transport. So that seems to be the unique scope of service that we are going to be looking a little deeper to see if we can make it more palatable for revenue servicing third-party vendors. Most other transit operators have an internal cash counting function. So before it goes to the revenue processing, the fare box vaults aren't transported necessarily. So we are requesting a not to exceed 200,000, which will cover a year and the optional monthly extensions. And given that this is both a routine service and sometimes on call due to service demand, we often have to ask for additional revenue services as the machines get full. We're asking a 10% contingency of 20,000 and an additional 30,000 for one-time implementation costs. As we change out the ticket vending machines, we actually have to purchase the coin that goes into the machines. So it's not necessarily paying the vendor, but purchasing the coins. And we have 20 machines, both from the ferry side and the bus transit side now that we are maintaining. This concludes my report, and I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Great. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Any questions, comments, concerns on this item from directors? I see Director
David.
Cochran.
Yeah, Jennifer, I'm just kind of curious, what is the total amount of money, either daily or weekly or monthly, that these people are collecting for us?
Ooh, it varies. I would say, I'd even have to look at Joe, who has better numbers in his head than I do. But, we generally collect, so they have bill vaults inside of each of those machines, and those machines hold up to about 5,000. So you want to collect the bills, but they could be ones, they could be 20s, they could be 5s. And then they collect, for the most part, it's mainly collecting credit card payments. So the cash collection part is fairly small on the machines. The larger part actually is the fare box vaults that come in on the cash collection. And I couldn't tell you now in COVID what those are, but we generally do them every other week at least right now, where it used to be 2 times a week.
I'll just add that pre-COVID, we were collecting about $4 million in cash from all sources. That's out of a $35 million fare recovery. So it's obviously a smaller fraction. Most of it is done electronically now. On the ferry system, of course, all of it is. And then on the bus system, a large part of it is. And then that has fallen to a fraction, probably about a third of that. So maybe $1 million we would be collecting now. But as Jennifer said, it's varying wildly because, of course, our ridership on our bus system is much smaller than it was before.
Well, you also mentioned they collect the credit card accounts. Do they?
Well, the machine, not this service. This is just for the cash collection.
This is just cash. All right,
Yes.
thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have any questions? I will turn to Madam Secretary to see if there's anyone from the public who'd like to speak on this particular item.
We do. Mr. Pilpel would like to also speak on this item. David, are you there?
Yep, just unmuting. Seems like we're in the weeds on some of these items, so I apologize if my comments seem a little detailed. at what point does it cost more to collect and process the cash than the revenue itself? I mean, clearly this is only about 125,000 a year, so we're not yet at the point of diminishing returns, but I'm just kind of looking at the cost to collect versus revenue itself. In terms of scope here, I'm just kind of thinking out loud if it might be less costly for district staff to drive around to various locations, collect the relatively small amounts of cash that I can imagine would be in the ticket vending machines in zip bags and aggregate that centrally for collection and deposit. So I can imagine somebody going to Larkspur and scooping up that cash, bringing it back to San Rafael, and have that aggregated at San Rafael with the bus revenue for collection and deposit. Back on the parking meters, thinking back to the previous item, are there still individual parking meters at the toll plaza lot? And if so, is a multi-space device, and I forget what those things are called, MTA has them in San Francisco, a multi-space device being considered for the next round of meter replacement at the toll plaza. And I assume that this includes the 3 bus divisions, although I suspect that Division 2 may not be in use right now, the ferry terminals and possibly the ticket vending machines at the Clipper vending machines at the toll plaza and San Rafael Transit Center and the Santa Rosa Transit Mall. But I don't know if those are operated and maintained by the district or if that's MTC through the Clipper arrangement. Anyway, I just thinking in detail about cash collection. Thanks for listening.
If I may just be responsive, we do not own any parking meters at any locations. So rest assured, we got out of that business many years ago. With respect to inquiry on the cost of collecting fares, I direct your attention, Mr. Pilpel, to page 67 of our proposed budget. Because for many years now, we have disclosed in our budget the average cost of collecting money, whether it's by bridge, bus, or ferry, and whether it's by Clipper or cash. So we disclose that information. Obviously, the pandemic has increased the cost of collections relative to the per transaction cost because we have fewer transactions and we have some baked in overhead or general costs that apply. But you can see the last several years of what those costs are. And I encourage you to look at page 67 at your convenience.
Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate that. Madam Secretary, anyone else?
That's all we have for this item.
Great. I'll bring it back and ask my colleagues if there's a motion to authorize execution of the Fifth Amendment with Brinks, Inc. for item number 7.
So moved.
Second.
Great. We have a motion and we have a second. Madam Secretary, can you please call the roll?
Thank you. Voting on item number 7, starting with Director Arnold, who's absent. Director Conroy is absent. Director Garbarino.
Aye.
Director Giudice.
Yes.
Director Grosboll.
Aye.
Director Hernandez.
Aye.
Director Maston.
Aye.
Director Milgar is absent. Director Parr. Director Parr, you might be on mute. I'll circle back afterwards. Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Director Rodoni is absent. Director Snyder is absent. Director Stephanie is absent as well. Director Thier.
Aye.
Thank you. Second Vice President Hill.
Yes.
First Vice President Cochran.
Yes.
And President Tirio.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll circle back. Director Parr. She might be having technical difficulties. We have 10 ayes.
Okay, great. Thank you. That motion does pass. So next on the agenda is item number 8, to authorize the setting of a public hearing to receive public comment on the proposed establishment of a pilot program for the educational institutional Clipper Pass. The staff report starts on page 33 and Ron Downing will be presenting on this report. Ron, go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Robert. This is Ron Downing, Director of Planning. The item before you begins on page 33, and it's a really interesting new fare concept for the region. It comes out of a lot of the coordination efforts that the region's transit operators and MTC have partnered together to advance. The reason we have to have a public hearing for this is a new fare within our fare structure. It is intended to be a trial in 2 different phases. The first phase will be oriented toward educational institutions and some specific affordable housing properties. And then a second phase in 2023 is intended to reach out to major employers in transit concentrated downtown areas like San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose to get employees to use multi-use passes. And these passes are intended to be used across multiple transit agencies. So there's a lot of learning curve here. It's going to be a pilot to determine how receptive the public is to these kind of passes, as opposed to paying single fares across the region each time they use different transit systems. So this is an experiment, if you will. There is no value associated with the pass. It's going to be an overlay to the district's existing fare structure. The Metropolitan Transportation Commission has pretty much penciled out reimbursements that they have estimated for the different transit operators that will be participating in this program. They do expect all of the region's transit operators who are in the Clipper program to be participants. They have identified $80,000 to Golden Gate Transit, Golden Gate Ferry to reimburse us for the use of these passes. In phase 1, they will be at no cost to the students who attend these educational institutions, nor the residents of 3 specific low-income housing properties on the peninsula. So this is going to be a 2-year effort. They would like to start the program on August 8th. So that's really the timeline that we have before you today to have a public hearing for the new fare and bring it to the board for approval. So the item before you recommends a public hearing on Thursday, June 23rd at 9 o'clock in the morning. And that would come back to the board for further deliberation at the July 21st, 2022 Finance-Auditing Committee, and if approved, be referred to the full board on July 22nd, 2022, allowing us to meet the August 8th implementation date. A little bit more detail, the initial agencies participating will be San Francisco State University, San Jose State University, UC Berkeley, Santa Rosa Junior College. Some of those are a bit far flung from our service area, like San Jose State, so I don't really expect a lot of usage on our system for people traveling to San Jose as students. And also the 3 housing properties are under the banner of Mid-Penn Housing, and these are principally in the Menlo Park and Foster City area. So again, not expecting a lot of usage on our system. However, we could see some usage of students going to San Francisco State, UC Berkeley, and Santa Rosa Junior College. So this is, again, a pilot program. There's no cost to the institutions, no cost to the students that would be using it in the first year. We're looking to get approval for the whole phase 1, phase 2 fare, because it would be the same fare instrument moving forward. And again, phase 2 would be targeted to major employers. These employers would be expected to contribute to the cost of this fare media and potentially the users as well. And the institutions, the educational institutions, would also be reevaluated at that point. So the only fiscal impact to the district at this point is the cost of actually conducting the public hearing, which is approximately $5,000 and is covered in the existing marketing and communications department budget. So again, the rules of the board require us to have a public hearing. Members of the public can comment in the standard ways that we have brought forward previously. They can attend the virtual public hearing, they can email comments, or they can send written comments to the district secretary, and all comments are weighed equally regardless of the mode in which they are received. So people don't actually have to attend the public hearing to make their comments. Comments received must be submitted by the close of business on June 23rd, 2022, and they will be evaluated by staff after that closing date. Another difference from our previous practice is MTC is going to serve as the lead for any Title VI analyses required as a result of the pilot project. They have asked the Federal Transit Administration for an extension to the normal timeframe for a Title VI analysis. And so we'll bring anything back to you that comes out of that if there's necessary approval from the Bridge District Board moving forward with regard to Title VI. Not clear if it's going to be handled at the individual agency level or at the MTC level. MTC and BART are the lead agencies for the project, and so we'll keep you informed as this rolls out. Our public notifications, if you approve this item today to refer it to the board and it's approved tomorrow, our outreach would be our standard media notifications, signage on all of our transit vehicles and ferries, press releases to local media, social media postings, of course, something on the website, and our email blast to customers and community-based organizations. All of the materials will be translated into Spanish per the district's limited English proficiency plan. So I think that covers the whole thing. There's a lot of information in the staff report that goes a little bit beyond what we would normally provide because this is something completely new, and it's something the region is very much looking forward to in the spirit of greater transit coordination. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much, Ron. Any questions, comments, or concerns from my colleagues? I see Director Hill.
Mr. Chair, could I add one thing?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm calling Director Hill first.
Okay, thank you. I want to commend the district for participating in this. It's among a plethora of things that are going to be happening relative to standardization and help through Title VI. And I'm really supportive of this particular effort and the things that Mr. Rabbit is working on through MTC also. So I think this is really going in the right direction. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Director Giudice.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also in favor of this. I think it's a great program. I can recall many years ago, a young Italian kid going down to City College to go to hotel and restaurant management school. And I think traveling on the 80 at that time, or was it the 50 all the way down, to Ocean Avenue. So I think this is great. I think, moving it forward, including maybe City College, at one point and getting this up into the North Bay would be a fabulous idea. And I commend the chair and the staff for bringing this forward.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? I'll look for the public through our secretary. If there's anyone like to speak on this item.
We do have our speaker. Mr. Pilpel would like to make a comment. David, are you still with us?
I am. It's the chatty David Pilpel today. So I support setting the public hearing. I understand that the fiscal impact is projected at about $80,000 a year. I'm wondering what ridership level that's based on, if it's pre-COVID, current, or based on the level of recovery that's anticipated for the next year or two. I'm wondering how this relates to the existing class pass programs, including at SF State. I'm wondering if this would be available to all eligible users for all trips, including trips not just to and from their place of work or school without any limits. So, for example, if I knew someone who was a current student at SF State University, would I be able to borrow their student ID for a day and travel anywhere in the Bay Area for free? So I guess I would just be careful about the potential for abuse and unexpected revenue foregone in the future, perhaps requiring that any user that has a photo ID be required to display that photo ID upon boarding or alighting a district vehicle to ensure that the instrument isn't being abused, something like that. Anyway, I also see Santa Rosa Junior College on the list. Would this apply to other Marin and Sonoma transit operators as well, and not just district vehicles? I think it's interesting that Sonoma State University is not included in the Phase 1 pilot program. Perhaps they could be added in the future. And finally, I think this is a good example of regional transit coordination and recovery efforts. Maybe we don't need things like SB 917 after all, if the region works together in support of coordination and cooperation efforts like this. You don't need a state mandate. Just do the right thing. Thanks for listening.
It's the chair's pleasure I could answer the speaker's questions.
Please.
The key thing is the word pilot. This is a pilot. There are dozens of universities and colleges in the Bay Area. So the goal is to do a pilot. And so, for instance, SF State currently has a Gator Pass that works on BART and Muni. So as part of the pilot, they want to gather data that if you make it easier to ride transit, if you make it basically free, will it grow ridership? So how the program will work is that, say, at SF State, 3/4 of the students will still have the Gator Pass that works just on BART and Muni, but 25% of the students will get this pass that works on any system in the Bay Area 24/7, whether they're going to school, they're going to work, they're visiting friends. And then they're going to gather data, because this will all be on Clipper, no photo IDs, to see how much usage it generates. And so they picked 4 just, geographically dispersed college settings in the Bay Area, plus a low-income housing series of settings in the peninsula, to test this out and to gather data. So the goal is to gather information to see, does this, removing the friction, if you wish, making it easier to ride transit, does it help? And so it is not for all the participants or students at a college setting. It's for about 25% of them, and they'll be giving it out. They'll gather lots of information. The data will be anonymized, so we won't know that it's Burt Hill that rode the bus that day and where they rode. We'll just know that this card was used a lot. And they'll compare that to the other cards that just work on 2 systems or 1 system, and then they'll take that, and going forward, they'll develop new fare concepts for the Bay Area that will then be more broadly rolled out.
Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate that. It is a proving ground here to see how the system works and how it could be expanded going forward. So I very much appreciate that. Madam Secretary, anyone else?
That's it. We have no other speakers.
Okay, so what's before us really is to set a public hearing on this particular item. So do we have a motion to authorize the setting of that public hearing for item number 8?
I'll move,
So moved,
Mr. Chairman. Or second.
I'm looking for Madam Secretary. I'm sure she got that first and that second, and we could have a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. I look to see the yellow who lights up first, so
there you go.
I'll pick those. Okay, we have a first and a second on item 8, starting with Director Arnold, who's absent. Director Conroy is absent. Director Garbarino.
Aye.
Director Giudice.
Yes.
Director Grosball.
Yes.
Director Hernandez.
Aye.
Director Maston.
Aye.
Director Melgar is absent. Director Parr.
Aye.
Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Director Rodoni is absent. Director Snyder is absent, and Director Stephanie is absent. Director Thier.
Aye.
Thank you. Second Vice President Hill.
Yes.
First Vice President Cochran.
Yes.
And President Tirio.
Yes.
Thank you. You have 11 ayes.
Great, thank you very much. That motion does pass. So before we move on to the budget presentations, I wanted to point out that this month we don't have our normal recurring monthly reports, as our meetings took place a week earlier and the meeting materials were developed before the month end close. Next month, staff will present those reports for April and May for our monthly review of the Golden Gate Bridge traffic and tolls, the bus and ferry transit patronage and fares, and the monthly statement of revenues and expenses, and the monthly statement of capital programs and expenditures as well. So we're going to move on then to agenda item number 9, which is the status report on the fiscal year 21-22 budget. The staff report starts on page 37 of your packet. And Joe, go ahead with your report, please.
Thank you very much. Down to the chair of the whole board. Let's take a look at our status report. This is for the current FY 21-22 budget, which is coming to a close in the next 6 weeks. It is, as we've talked about in the past, being balanced, the transit shortfalls being covered by emergency one-time funding. If we could turn to page 38 in your, or 39 actually, in your report, that has the chart that we've been looking at, the table we've been looking at each month. It shows in the upper right-hand corner the $74 million original deficit that we had. There have been a few changes. I'll just point them out really quickly, and we can move on to the to next year's budget. The changes are of course, we're using ARP funding. That's lines 1 and 2. Line numbers are to your far left side of the page. Those are the ARP funding that's going to be used to help balance the budget. We also have a new line, line 3. And what this is it's estimated total revenue carryover or total revenue transfer, approximately $16 million. What that means is, and I think we've talked about this, we haven't talked about it recently, but we've talked about it in the past over the last couple of years, and we will talk about it again in the budget report that follows. The federal ARP funds and all the federal emergency transit funds we're allowed to bill transit expenses and use those funds. We have done that each year. And in some cases, it had allowed the district not to spend toll revenue, which would have been a toll subsidy, and not spend that toll revenue and be able to spend the ARP funds in its place. And what that has done is it has produced what we call a toll revenue carryover, or toll revenues that have been transferred to the district reserves that could be used in the future time by the board to pay for transit expenses. In this case, what we're estimating is this year will produce approximately $16 million of that toll revenue. It will go into district reserves that then could be used in future years. So and we've added that estimate because now we've been able to make it as we've come close to the end of the fiscal year. And that's line 3. Then line 4 is where we've updated line 4 is STA-TDA, which we've had there each month. Line 5, we've updated the tolls and transit fares for actual revenues. That's line 5, and that's in line 6, then line 7. Those are updated to the third quarter. And that's where we've looked at as I mentioned, the toll and transit fares from where we thought they would be at this point of the year. And the last line 8 is the updated change in operating expenses. And that's the case we talked about last month, where we have projected that the district will not spend the level of operating expenses that it expected to spend because it has not increased its transit service as much as it was hoping it would be able to if its patrons had returned. And as we have discussed repeatedly, that has not occurred yet, although it is changing in the last couple of months. And with that, if there's any, and at the end, you can see at the bottom of the page, it's balances out. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Great. Thank you so much, Joe. I'll look to my colleagues. Any questions, comments, concerns on this particular item? Not seeing any. And Madam Secretary, anyone from the public like to speak on this item?
We do. We just have Mr. Pilpel is back with us. Mr. Pilpel, are you there?
Yep, just very briefly on this. As always, great work keeping the district in business. Traffic is still up while the transit recovery lags below projections. And just a quick note, the chart on page 43, let me go to that. Far left at the bottom, the 762,804 got copied and is in there twice. You'll see that. Not a big deal. I'm sure that'll be fixed next month. Again, great work to staff on keeping it together. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else, Madam Secretary?
We have no other speakers on this item.
Great. Well, there's no action on this item, so we'll move on then to item number 10. It's the initial presentation of the proposed fiscal year 22-23 operating and capital budget. The staff report starts on page 47, and a proposed budget book was provided separate from your packet and is available online. And I know we're going to, I just want to say thank you to Joe and his staff for all the great work, in particular this year, providing these updates at each and every meeting to really track the budget with I know you're always tracking it, but allow the directors and the committee to really track that budget, especially given all the different parameters that we've been going through with the ups and downs of the pandemic. So just thank you to you and your staff. And with that, Joe, can you go ahead and start your report on the proposed fiscal year 22-23 budget?
Yes, thank you very much to the whole committee, and to bear with us. This is your, just to recognize, this is a longer presentation than I would typically make on a board item. You are aware this is your sort of due diligence opportunity to become familiar with the budget. And so we will do that by looking through the first couple of sections of the budget. We are clearly not going to cover all 250 pages. So you can thank that. It is there in front of you. As mentioned already, there will be there was a board item. There is a presentation that just popped up onto your screen, and there is the budget. As we have done for quite some time now, this is your opportunity to actually use the budget. Some of you have received a printed budget. Some of you will prefer to look at it online. And as the chair mentioned, it is there online for you to review. And anybody following along from the YouTube, it's at thegoldengate.org. Then you go to the district tab, the board of directors tab, then the meeting documents tab, and it's listed as the FY 22-23 proposed budget. I urge you to pick that up. However, the bulk of what I'm going to talk about is also in this presentation, because what we have done is essentially copied directly from the budget some of the information and stuck it on these slides. So you can do that, although I urge you to get the actual document. I think it will be useful. I will be looking at the actual document myself, because I think that's, as I said, it's our opportunity to become familiar with it. And this is clearly a document where it's much more valuable to know where to find something than to actually know what it is. As I think the general manager pointed out earlier, that mentioning one of the pages where there was a document, a piece of information that was useful in the conversation we had earlier about collecting transit fares, cash transit fares. And so it will this way we'll get a little bit familiar with that. So with that, I'd like you to turn over to your budget or to the presentation, and Amrit will be flipping the pages and follow on. We will start, you saw originally the cover of the budget. Now we will start with the first page, which is what I would call the thank you page, the title page of our document. And in it, it is a thank you page. And I think it takes a huge group to get this 250-page budget together. I'll point out that the names in there are my staff, Jennifer Minucci and Amy Fry, who handle the operating capital budget, and then their staff, Lenny, Jennifer, Daniel, Chris, and Eric, do a lot of the work in compiling the budget. On top of that, all of us, then thank the district DGMs, the officers, and the general manager for their time, effort in putting together their pieces of the budget. And then, of course, I know, would be thanking their staff, because that's how they get that information coming up. So it's quite a group. Lastly, you'll see at the bottom at the end, there's a note that Lenny has retired. She has been handling the data analysis. Most of the data analysis that you've seen over the last 7 years have come from Lenny. And so we will greatly miss her, but she has retired and moved on. And Eric Reeves is hired in her spot, although we're not expecting Eric to necessarily replace her. He has his own skills and talents, and we will be working with him in the future. So we can turn on to the next page. That just in your budget or presentation, that recognizes the districts does each year receive the GFOA Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. And that's just to let you know that according to the standards across the nation, this is a distinguished budget. It is something that's useful. It has the type of information that has been deemed to be useful both for you as a board, us management, and also for the public to get to know the organization, understand what we're here to do, what we have done, and what we expect to do in the following year. With that, we'll turn on to page 9, which is your general manager's presentation. That's a really quick highlight summary of both what we've done. The district has managed to go through what it's facing right now, and then what it's looking at in the budget for the next year. All condensed down to about two pages, 2.5 pages. It's very quick. And essentially in this case, of course, it talks about the COVID, talks about how difficult that has been for our patrons, how we've lost a lot of our commuter customers. They have not returned, how thankfully we have one-time money to replace that. And then how we've built our budget to ensure that there will be sufficient resources if our customers were to return, that we would be able to add the service back. And that, in summary, is your 200 pages right there. However, there is excellent information in each of the chapters. I urge you to look at the bridge, bus, and ferry and district division, those 4 chapters, which we will not be covering here today. It's just too much. But in the division status section, and there's about a page and a half where those the general managers of those groups go through. So there's the accomplishments of last year's and also looking at what they're going to be concentrating on next year. And I find that very valuable. And I think anybody would. And as mentioned, it's just a page or two for each of them in those 4 places. For example, the bridge section starts on page 83. It's also listed in your table of contents, which is at the beginning of the budget. So just look for the division status section. With that, we will turn on to page 16, which is the COVID section. This was added 3 years ago. Of course, we did not have a section before on that. We would just jump right into the finances of the district, which is in the next chapter. But we've decided it just needed something to discuss how dramatically different the district's finances were, and therefore sort of what the budget was going to stand for. We have found that we expected it to be a one-time event. Of course, we all did. Now we had a second year. Now we really have a third because the district finances are still upside down, although things have improved quite a bit. The key takeaway of this particular section, we'll go through some of the charts and tables in a minute, is that bus and ferry customers have not returned, and our core customers, which are commute customers, have clearly not returned. Things are looking better, as Dennis mentioned, but they have not returned to the levels that we expected before. With that, because the district is chartered and set up starting back in the 1920s when we got our charter, and then when the bridge was built in the 1930s, to be a fee-for-service agency. That means that people pay us a fee, our customers pay a fee when they use our service. So, which works great because we do run a monopoly and it's a very valued service. On the other hand, when they don't need our service, that means we don't collect the fee, and that's where we've been. If they change their behaviors, which they have, first by force, and then now it may be, we'll have to see how much of that becomes a new tradition that they have different behaviors. That changes the amount of fees that we collect, and that's what you've seen. So it started out dramatic. We're over $3 million, a week. We were collecting less than we used to collect. Now that's dropped down to say around $1 million a week, but still $1 million a week adds up to $50 million a year, which is a large percentage of the revenue that we collect. And we're still sitting at that point as we speak today. I mean, we'll go over that in a little more detail. Having just to say, because of that, this is it makes conservative projections as far as the patient is concerned. And that's as far as revenue is concerned. However, it does not make conservative assumptions when it comes to the expense, because we don't know when our customers will return. It could be quickly, and we want to be ready. There wants to be sufficient budget authority in the budget to allow the district to expand those transit services when needed. And so this budget is built that way, as was the last 2 budgets. So we have been doing that. This is the 3rd year of that activity. Let's turn to page 19. And now we'll get into a few of the tables. And as earlier I should have mentioned, feel free to speak up. It's going to work for me if I hear you. If you have a question, where there will be time at the end, but if you have a question, you really wanted to bring something up, then it works for me better if you just speak up, because as I am looking at different presentations, I may not see a raised hand or a wave. Having said that, if we look at page 19, in the middle of the page, there's a table. Numbers and then some bar graphs, but the numbers are what we're going to look at this time. What the importance of this is the bridge division revenues and expenses. The key component for us is is the revenues. That comes almost exclusively from toll revenue. That is increasing. You'll notice this is actual 2021, 2022, and then the projected 2023 going from left to right on the screen. And what we're looking for is the fact that that number has gone from 110 to 122 to $140 million a year, and that's positive. As I mentioned, it's not quite where it used to be, but at least it's going up. What that does is that produces the 3rd line of number, which was the bold, which is the revenues over expenses. And the key component here is the district's charter has us using those revenues to subsidize transit. So if we don't produce those, if numbers stay low, we have less subsidy for transit. I know that's something we've been talking to you about for years now, but it is the key component. It is going up. And so that's a good sign. And that's something we'll see as we move forward. Moving on to the next page 20. You'll see a few charts here that I know you become quite familiar with. They are very valuable, so we'll mention them again, but we'll go through them quickly. These are the ones that compare the 4 years of COVID, well, 3 years of COVID with the one before. The top line is, of course, pre-COVID 2019. The red line or bottom line is 2020, when we had the big drop in traffic on the bridge. And then the green line was last year, or the year we're in right now. And the yellow line is the calendar year, the end of this fiscal year, this calendar year we're in right now. The positive here, this one is for bridge traffic. The positive here, of course, is that the yellow line is growing. It's larger than last year. Of course, it's less than pre-COVID. And that means we're going to bring in less revenue. And that's on the next page. We take a look at bridge revenue. You see bridge revenue here at the same 4 lines, 2019 as the top one. If you have color in front of you, then the gold is 2020. That's the line off to the right. That's this year that we're looking at. It is not far below last year, which the pre-COVID year is, it's considerably above last year. Those are both good signs. Of course, that gap is transit subsidy money. And so we're still missing that transit subsidy money. We don't know exactly where that yellow gold line will go from now. We're projecting it to move out, remain somewhat flat, and not get back to COVID, but we'll talk about that next. But it is a good sign that it is increasing. If we turn the page, we will talk about what we call the bridge division recovery assumption. So that's essentially where we think traffic will move forward. These were made, just to warn you, all these assumptions were made several months ago to get into this budget. And things have even improved from where we were. If we were making them today, we might make them to be a little more aggressive. However, we have been disappointed the last 2 years when we have made those changes. So these are conservative. They are essentially saying that bridge traffic will remain roughly where it was at that time, which is about 85%. It's already about 90. Hopefully it will stay there. It will not fall back down. But these are lower than what you're seeing today. But they're conservative. And as I mentioned in the previous report, on the status report, we of course will tell you each month if we are doing better than what the budget guessed. And so that will therefore reduce any shortfall. And we will show you that each month in that status report. And we will continue doing that next year so that we have the most up-to-date, you'll have the most up-to-date information about where the district is. Next, we'll turn to page 23 and we'll look at the transit side. As mentioned, overall, the transit operations, as you folks are very well aware, they do not produce more revenue than they use. In fact, of course, their expenses are greater than the revenues they produce. And the district's charter has us making that up with toll subsidies, which is quite different than many other transit properties around the area. We use forms of tax. We use the bridge subsidy. And when, of course, that is down, which it is now, that means we have less subsidy for transit. On top of that, of course, the fare revenue, which was the other single largest source for the transit properties, that's also been greatly reduced. It is growing, but it is still greatly reduced from where it was. As it is, the district's expecting about a $47 million shortfall in the budget, which is to do with the transit operations, having less fare and revenue, and of course, most importantly, less toll subsidy. That will be made up by ARPA funds. Let's turn to page 24. We'll look at the bus division first. There's a table on page 24, and on the far right-hand side column is this proposed budget. The other 2 years of the last other two columns of the last 2 years. You can see at the very top of that column that the revenue, the bridge division operating revenue is about 32 million, and its expenses are 108. Quite a significant difference. That would be the operating revenues would be greater normally, and then the remainder would usually be filled in by tolls. Of course, it can't be now. So we're using what you see in the middle part of the chart table. We're using about $48 million in ARPA funds. That's the bold 48 million. That will help reduce that $76 million shortfall. And then the remainder, the 28 million, is toll funds. So between the two, they will fully fund the expected expenses in the budget of the bridge division. And that's a similar pattern to what we've used in the past 2 years, except for in those years, it wasn't ARPA funding, it was CARES or CRISA funding. Next, turning the page to page 25, and these are the budget number pages. We'll look at the ridership graph at the bottom. You can see, again, the same 4 lines, and I know you're familiar with this one from our previous reports. We've done it during the year, but you can see pre-COVID line way at the top. And then the gold line in the bottom left-hand side is rising, and that's positive, but you can see there's a huge distance from where it is to where it used to be at one point. So as mentioned earlier, our bus commuters, these are mostly commuters, have not returned as of yet, but it is ticking up, and it is up above last year, which is very positive. Looking at the next page, we'll look at revenues. Again, revenues are also increasing. Same dynamic holds. They're up over last year, have a ways to go to get back to where they would have been in the past. The next page, we'll look at sort of the recovery assumptions.
Joe, this is, I did have a
yes.
question. Does the, sorry, Dick here, does the fair revenue projection include the annual increase in the fares for the buses?
Yeah, that's a excellent question. I meant to mention that in the assumptions starting earlier. The district has passed over the last couple of years, last couple of decades, actually, 3 different long-term fare increase programs, each about 5 years. That one ended, the last one ended this year. So this budget does not include a fare increase. It was projected at the time that we would not have the patrons coming back, and it seemed a difficult time to add a fare increase on top of that, to go through the whole, as you know, when we do one of those 5-year fare increase programs, we go out, we have public hearings, we talk to the public, and we tell them why we need to have a fare increase, what it would do. And the patronage at the time when we would have to take that out, which would have been starting last December, was so low and in such a difficult place, it did not seem at the time that would make sense. And I know we mentioned it, I know at I think through one of the general manager's report, I think at a board meeting, Dennis might remember more directly, that it did not make sense at that time to do that. So this budget doesn't include that. The belief would be that during this fiscal year, though, we would be talking to the board about putting together a new fare increase program that would start again in the future.
Was there any discussion among the staff in your office about possibly lowering the fares to try and increase our bus revenue, or any other efforts during the year to try and generate more bus traffic, given I know Dennis's response has been that people are still not downtown, so it may not have, but I'm just curious whether or not there's been any discussion about trying to take any efforts to generate more ridership.
Absolutely, there's been discussions, and I think right now we, as a region, actually have been waiting to see what's going to happen in Sacramento. There have been the budget, the governor's office had a proposal out to provide 3 months of free transit that was getting a lot of traction. And I know that the legislature is talking about it. They may have different ideas, but it still may be along those same lines. And so that's what the region, we've spent a lot of time with our colleagues in the region, the other transit properties, talking about how we might implement such a program. So that is definitely something that some form, whether it be free or reduced or something like that, looks like it's likely to happen in the months, probably late summer, fall.
And is that only on the condition that the state funds it? Is that the idea?
The state that was their condition. They're because of the surplus funding, they have the resources. They could make some sort of a contribution that would go to MTC that would then come out to the different properties here in the district.
Well, I mean, I'm just one member, but I guess I would favor at some point lowering the fares or taking some action to try and improve our bus ridership, regardless of what the state does. And I realize that's a catch-22. We're getting less revenue, but I'm not sure we've done much during the 2.5 years of COVID to try and increase our ridership. And I understand that people are not downtown much, but other than one free weekend, I think that's all we've done. So, and I'm not being critical. I don't have any great answers either, but when I hear about I know Muni's not raising fees for 2 years. I think that's what they said they're doing. But anyway, I guess I would encourage you and the staff to, if there's any ideas that have been floating, to try and get more people to ride buses, that, it would be helpful from my perspective. But thank you.
Thank you, Director Grossball. And staff has talked about having free weekdays on transit, similar to the free weekend we did of July of last year. We're waiting for things to open up a little bit more, because we can offer free, but if the boss says you don't have to come to the office, it's not going to work. But we are in our planning on having some free weekdays to see what that does to gin up service, and that would be tied to marketing. As Joe said, right now we're watching the budget discussions in Sacramento because the governor's come out strong saying he wants to make transit free statewide for 3 months.
Okay. Well, and I applaud you for not going for a fee increase this year. Thank you. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And thank you for speaking up. Appreciate that. So we were on page 27, and that's where we're just looking at the bus ridership projections for the next year. And again, like with the bridge, these have been kept relatively flat at about 1/3 of the pre-COVID level. That was where we were sitting when we made those a couple months ago. It has increased a little bit beyond that. I think Dennis mentioned that it's got it up as high as about 40%. Hopefully that will hold, and hopefully that will continue to grow. If ridership stays higher, that means ridership and revenues will be up, and those will be reported to you in your status report each month. You'll be able to see that. Next, we'll turn to page 28. We'll take a look at the ferry division. This will be the same charts and tables that we have looked at for bus, but they will of course be for the ferry division. Again, if you look at this table on the bottom of the page, you'll notice that like bus, the ferry division revenues are expected to be about 9 million, and the overall expenses about 49 million. So that's about a $40 million shortfall. Generally, that would not be as big. Of course, ferry revenue at one point was bringing in 57% of the budget because ferry revenue was very high. And now, of course, you see it's bringing about 20% of the budget. And so, in other words, fares would have made up a lot more, and we would have made up the rest with tolls. Now we're using we'll use about $25 million in ARPA funding, and another 15 in tolls to make up the $40 million shortfall. Page 29, take a look at those same charts we've been looking at, but this time for ferry ridership. You can see it was extremely low last year, the green line at the bottom. This year, as Dennis mentioned, is many times over higher, and you can see the gold line is moving up at a nice clip. Hopefully that will continue as we go forward. It's still about a third of where we were in pre-COVID times. Turning to the next page, we'll look at the ferry revenue. Same chart, same discussion. It's much higher than it was last year. Again, about a third, 40% of work of pre-COVID days. As you can see, that ferry ridership and ferry revenue does bounce around quite a bit, the summer being the peak time. We used to be peak time because, of course, tourism on the Sausalito and also the baseball service. Now it's probably going to be tourism, Sausalito baseball, and Angel Island service will probably all push the summer up higher than the winter months. And then turn to page 31.
Joe, if I can interrupt.
Yes.
Looks like Director Hill has a question.
Okay, Director Hill.
Just a quick question. I assume that the gold line includes our added ferry services that we started earlier this year.
Yes, it does.
So it doesn't necessarily represent an equal to the other years. That's the only thing I wanted to point out.
No, it is not at a 1-for-1. These have always been the total of what the operation is actually running at the time, because as you can imagine, the pre-COVID levels, we were actually running a lot more trips than we were running either in 2020 or 2021. Same routes, but different trips, and we were running them differently. We're doing some triangle service for a while in order to afford to keep the costs low because we didn't have the passengers. So you're right. Each line does represent a different number of trips, and in the case of the gold line, actually a different piece of service. Both now weekend service for Tiburon and daytime service, and also Angel Island service. Thank you, Director Hill. Looking at page 31 in your report is the assumptions for ferry, and we have those growing from where we were back a couple months ago at around 25% up to close to 30% at the end of the year. Of course, as we just mentioned, ferry is running about that now and slightly above that. So hopefully that will continue, and we will be reporting positive news to you in the status report of higher revenues than we had budgeted. Turn on to page 33. We're going to look at the one-time funding that has come into the district. As I mentioned, the one-time funding, of course, was provided to the district because of need, both originally an emergency need and then even competitively on the last grant, the 75 million that was received by the district was a competitive grant that were against transit properties across the country, looking at ones that were in the most need for extra resources. And unfortunately, the district fell into that category, but fortunately it was recognized and we have received a substantial amount of funding because of that. In total, the district received about a net of about $282 million in emergency one-time funding. In the table that you see on this page, you get a sense of how that money has been spent out. That's sort of the middle box, the one-time funding. Gives you a sense of which year, how much we've had to spend. I'll start at the top. The top has the revenues and expenses for the year going from 20, 21, 22, and 23. So all 4 years, budget year being far to the right. The first set of bold numbers are the expected deficits for those years, either actual or projected. Actual, the first two, projected the two on the right. The third bold line represents the total amount of one-time funding that were used or expected to be used in those given years. If you added up the four of those, it totals about $249 million, which is 33 million less than what the district has provided. So there will be more revenue available, one-time emergency funding available next year. That would be the 23-24 fiscal year. And then the bottom line is the cumulative toll revenue carryover. At this point, it's expected to be about $51 million. That means that the district has been able to expend our one-time federal funding to pay for transit expenses that would have or could have been in the past paid for by toll revenue. So that toll revenue, that $51 million was put into the district reserves. And the district board can use that for future transit expenses going forward or future transit capital projects, or as it sees fit as we move into the future years. All right, now we're going to move on to page 38. So we're going to leave the COVID section and move into the primary two introduction chapters to the budget. First one is on the district's finances, second is on the actual budget themselves. And these are the ones we would typically look at in a given year. Since we've covered a decent amount of material already, we will skip some of the discussion about the budget and how it is put together and things of that nature and move right into the charts and tables themselves. So if you turn to page 38, as mentioned, that has a series of, well, two tables and corresponding pie charts. And the first one is of revenues, the second one is of expenses. The revenues, the importance of that is that tolls are still our largest form of revenue. It's important to note that doesn't change and hasn't changed. Not as large as we would like it to be, but it is the single biggest source. The next biggest source is down at the bottom of that table, which is federal one-time funding. There's two pieces there, tranche 2 and part of tranche 3. That's but a total that's about $74 million. So between the two, they make up about 2/3 of the budget. And then we have use of capital reserves and other government grants, both capital and operating grants that fund the full budget. This $310 million total is the entire operating and capital that we expect to spend. And we'll talk about each of those separately in the next chapter. The next table and corresponding pie chart is how we expect to spend the money. And the type of expense. So transit operating is about half of the budget. So as we mention each year, we are a transit company. We spend about half of all of our resources on transit operating expenses. Next, there's about 100 million in bridge operating expenses, and then the two smaller pieces for the district portion of the capital expense. Of course, this is only the district portion. There is also a district grants that are spent too. So we move on to the next page 39. The importance of all these numbers, and I know there's a lot of them, is the right-hand column and of the two tables, and is essentially the first table essentially just in summary takes all of the revenues and all the expenses and says what part of that comes from the district reserves. And so the bottom right-hand corner of that table is at negative 25 million or parentheses 25 million. That means we're expecting this year to take $25 million out of the district reserves. Now, of course, the only reason the number is only 25 is because we're going to spend $74 million in one-time funding from the federal government. The district is not producing enough revenue on its own, but it does have that support. And so it's able to take a limited 25 million out of the budget out of its reserves. And the reason it's taking the 25 million out is because that's what it budgeted for capital projects. And we'll talk about that in the next chapter. So this is a normal in quotes presentation, except for the one-time funding source. Since we're not able to fund it out of our own operating revenues, but with that extra money, we're able to make a normal chart. The next table shows that, well, we have that negative 25 million. What does that actually do to the reserves? Well, it doesn't reduce the reserves because we also have contributions from the budget, the balanced budget, going back into reserves. And that totals about $33.8 million. So there's a positive $8.8 million impact on the reserves. And that's just an extremely important point that the district, although is facing really hard times, but because of the one-time federal funding, it's able to maintain its financial solvency and actually continue to build out the reserves by continuing able to fund its future capital reserves for its capital projects. And the importance of that is, of course, we need those capital projects and to keep our equipment maintained and able ready to provide the service, both the bridge and the buses, ferries, and their related facilities. So next, turn to the next page, page 40. And that's the standard table we have each year on how transit is funded. Important for people to realize, this was something we talk about a lot now, but is that the transit system does need its subsidy in order to exist. The first line is the toll subsidy. In a typical year, that toll subsidy would be about 48 to 50% of the overall cost of the transit system. As it is now, we've only been able to use, last year was about 14%, and next year will be budgeted to be about 27% of the subsidy will be from the toll system, the tolls. The rest, of course, is made up, those are at the bottom of this table, are made up by one-time funding. Last year it was ARP1, and this year, and that was about at the point of 50% combined, ARP1 and ARP2. This coming year, it'll be ARP2 and ARP3, and that'll approximately add about 47% of our transit budget. So transit, the one-time funding is sort of made up for, of course, the loss in toll revenue and subsidy and the loss in the fare subsidy that we would have received normally. Next, we'll turn to page 43 and take a look at our overall capital reserves. As I mentioned, the capital reserves are able to grow, and that's because the district has been able to balance its budget going forward. We're expecting the district reserves to be up to $258 million going into next year. If you turn to page 45, you will look at the table that talks about how those reserves are allocated and then spent out. And this is really important. The $258 million seems like a very large number, and of course it is a large number, but the district has billions and billions of dollars in assets that it needs to maintain. And billions of assets takes hundreds of millions of dollars to maintain them. In fact, actually more than that over time. And that's what we document in our 10-year capital plan, which is actually one of the appendices in this budget. This particular chart shows that the expectation is that the district will allocate those revenues over the next couple of years. That's the red line, or the line that's more to the left if you're looking at a black and white version. And then the line more to the right that it spends down slower is how the money is actually spent out. And the spend out is considerably slower than the allocation, because most capital projects take many years to finish, and the money spends out slower than when you allocate it as a board. You say, I'm going to devote this much to a project. The allocation could come quite quickly. And the reason both those lines, of course, eventually get down to zero, the district will be working in the intervening years to continue to raise money through its operating budget to keep refunding its capital reserves, to keep that line from ever moving zero. Essentially, that line to the right will keep moving out to the right, staying above zero, which we have been able to do for the last 15, 18 years. And that we will continue to do. So that's the discussion about the district's finances There's, of course, a lot more in this chapter for you to look at yourselves. We'll move on to page 58 and take a look at the proposed operating budget itself. So we'll move down to page 58 and take a look at those charts that we have there. They're similar to the ones that you just viewed on the total budget, but these are for the operating budget on its own. The tolls are still, of course, the single largest piece. They now make up 54% of the operating budget's revenue, and that's in the table next to the pie chart. Fares, unfortunately, only make about 4%. They're less than a third of where they would have been in the pre-COVID days, maybe even a quarter. Then the next single largest source of the revenue, of course, is the bottom line. You see there one-time federal funding, almost $74 million, or almost 30% of the budget will be funded by those one-time federal fundings. So you can see the incredible importance that they play in our ability to continue providing service. Next, where do we spend those district funds? As mentioned, the bus and ferry division or transit division makes up about 62% of the pie, bus being the largest, but the two of them make up about, we've been saying close to 2/3 of the overall budget, and the other third is bridge division. Slightly larger this year, bridge division slightly larger, transit division slightly smaller than the 1/3, 2/3 analogy we've used over past years, but the idea still holds. As I said, we are primarily spending our resources in providing public transit for our customers. Next, we'll take a look at page 59. And the point of these two tables, and I know they're busy, is really to look at the graph on this one, the stack bars. And that was just, again, to sort of point out the importance of the one-time federal funding. That's the dark green on the stack bars. I'll just take one example. If you look at the two stack bars to the far right, that's the budget year. The far right stack bar is the expenses, and the one a little bit to its left is the revenues. And the dark green is the one-time funding revenues. You can see just graphically, for those of you who work better on graphical presentation, that's a very large chunk. In fact, that revenue that's coming in is equal, as I mentioned, is equal to almost a third. And it covers a large piece of our expenditures that we would have to make otherwise. And that's what we're eventually going to have to replace, hopefully through growth in our passengers and growth in our bridge customers. And if not, it will be in some form of either finding other revenues or some form of reduction we'll have to make in future years. Fortunately, that is put off another year plus by the ability for us to receive the one-time federal funding. Next, we'll turn to page 61. Take a look at expenses. It's a large table, quite busy. Those are your major, or revenues, I'm sorry, not expenses. We'll be looking at the revenues in detail first, and then we'll look to expenses. And that's a large table, and those give you your basic revenue sources. And we'll talk a little about a couple of them. As I mentioned earlier, toll revenues are expected to grow, both from the fact that there's a toll increase and also from the fact that we are budgeting a slight increase in, I mentioned it was flat, but it's a slight increase in overall traffic going into next year. Transit fare is the same thing. There is no fare increase. You see there, it's basically flat. And because as I mentioned earlier, we were projecting a flat growth in transit patronage, a relatively flat growth in transit patronage. You don't see much in the way of expenses of increased revenues. However, if they do increase, we will be reporting that in those reports. And then lastly, at the bottom of this table, you can see the one-time funding section, and that shows that each of the last couple of years, we had an actual expenditure of about, that's not the bold numbers, but the ones right above it, a line right above it. Last year, 2 years ago, we had about 67 million. This year, we're expecting to spend about 64 in one-time funding, and next year it'll be about 74 projected. Now, it may end up being less than that if we don't increase the service as much as what we would hope. If we won't do that, if we're not seeing a rebound in the customer base. Next, turning to page 64, we'll look at projected operating expenses. The operating expenses, again, are of course equal to the revenues in this particular presentation. So about $256 million. It is a significant increase over last year's expected actual expenditures. Not really over expected budget, but over expected actual expenditures. And that's because we did not expend, as we mentioned earlier, some of our transit expenses that were there, that were budgeted to allow for increased customer demand. And we will be doing the same thing this year. That will be, we have the majority of the expenditure increase you see is to do with sort of refunding that extra service to try to get us back closer to what we had in the pre-COVID days if our passenger return. The assumptions also include the fact that there do have salary increases in there that have been agreed to for the coalition and the non-represented employees, not for the ATU employees at this time because their contract will be under negotiation shortly. And when they, of course, reach a conclusion, they will be covered from this budget. It does include all negotiated expenditure increases associated with pension contributions, healthcare, and OPEB. Those are all very significant part of the increases of the district budget. And with fuel this year, as you folks are all quite aware in your own lives, fuel is quite more expensive than it used to be just last year. Next, we'll take a look at a couple of significant expenses which are either different or new this year that we've added to this section, which starts in the next couple of pages, but I'll have you turn to page 68. And we'll take a look at the OPEB expenses. And that's for the other post-employment benefits. It's a trust and it's reduced by quite a bit. In the past years, we have been paying roughly $11 to $12 million a year. That's our contribution. Next year, the contribution is set at $8 million. This contribution amount is set by the actuary for the OPEB trust. Those of you that serve on that board are already aware of this, that the actuary report came in and it determined that the district's contribution would fall. The primary reason for that was the excellent returns that have occurred to the district investment portfolio. And that when you have more money in the bank, you're required to contribute less, to be blunt about it. The other very good reason was that the district has moved its employees to transition them through negotiations with Coalition and ATU to the CalPERS program. And the CalPERS program has lower rates, and that has also led to the reduced cost of the future benefits. And therefore, the amount that we have to contribute is less. So that amount has gone from 12 million approximately down to about 8 million. The next section, turning the page, has been added, and that's on the healthcare programs that both for we have for our active and retired employees. They are now all in CalPERS plans, all of our district retirees and actives. And what's significant about that is it's the first time that the district's no longer self-insured. We pay an insurance premium the beginning of each year, and we pay it each month for our employees, and they then receive, and our retirees, and they receive their coverage. So we can actually more precisely predict those costs, and we have therefore instituted information in the budget that would have been very complex for us to put into a budget in the past in this kind of detail. What we've put in here was the annual premium costs, which is the first table that you're seeing at the top of the page. You can see they vary quite a bit by the program. There's 3 different programs that employees can choose from, and whether they're insuring just themselves, a plus one, or a family. So there is a matrix that you see there, and they vary quite a bit. Based on that matrix, all of our employees include some form of premium sharing, which either is negotiated or it's set by the board for the non-represented employees, and you can see that in the next table. And that varies quite a bit, actually, depending on those instances of negotiation or the board setting those. And it varies, of course, the percentage of that to your actual premium varies depending on whether you're a single or a family. It can vary quite a bit, from around 3% of an employee's maybe contributing 3% of premium to anywhere from up to 12 to 14% of the premium, again, based on those parameters of a particular employee. The district provides to help offset out-of-pocket costs for employees of these CalPERS programs. It provides both a stipend and an HRA, which is a funded program that the employee can use to reimburse their expenses. The HRAs, I'll discuss those first. They are set up to, and they appear on the next page. They are set up to help offset the costs of both coinsurance and copays for prescriptions of medical programs. In their first year, for all employees to be in them, employees spent approximately 26% of the resources that were available to them. So the HRAs seem to be big enough to cover all of those out-of-pocket costs that employees have for this type of healthcare and prescription drugs. And then some employees also receive stipends, and the stipends are based on the selection of your plan. You can see the stipends allow an employee to recover most or all, depending of their out-of-pocket premium sharing. Again, depending on the employee's plan choice and their family size. So in a Kaiser and Gold selection, essentially the net out-of-pocket cost is well, there's positive. In other words, they're receiving money back from the district. And it's only in the Platinum plan, and then in one instance in the Gold plan, where an employee does have an out-of-pocket cost for their healthcare. So that's in those charts. And if we'll move on now to page 70 to take a look at the changes to the table of organization that are included in this budget. There is one change. This is a section where we talk about as you're well aware, the board has control over the positions of the district. And when the district wants to add or change or reduce a position, the district comes to the board to do so. In this case, the district through the budget is requesting to add one position to the budget. That is in the IT department of the district division. It would be associated with the ERP, or the enterprise resource planning system that is going to be implemented in the district over the next several years. The district already has several employees working on that plan, but has realized that it needs a third resource. This resource would help implement that program, but also would work directly with the business users of that program, and with the ensuring both their use, how they use the system, but also ensuring the data integrity. They would support that the user's use of that data, and also understanding both the business and the technical parts of the program. And next, we'll turn to page 74 and take a look at the capital budget. Okay, what you have in front of you here are in the capital budget is two tables, and they summarize the expenditures on the capital budget. Capital budget is approximately 57 projects, 9 of them new. The remainder are continuing from the past years. The total cost of that projects is $465 million. However, some of it has already been spent, and some of it will be spent in future years. Only $54 million is scheduled to be spent this year. And of that $54 million, $25 million of that, as we mentioned earlier, is scheduled to come out of the district reserves. In other words, to be sent from district resources. The remainder would come from capital grants that come to the district. Now, each and every one of these projects, these 57 projects, are discussed in detail in the division sections. So both all in bridge, bus, ferry, and district each have a section on the capital budget, and they each have a section where they have a paragraph or so on each of these projects and with their expenditure levels. And we will not be going up to date, but feel free to refer to those, each of those. So we can turn to page 78, and we're going to talk about the proposed list. What the capital project list is it is a list of projects that would help the district improve its efficiency by allowing the district staff to start one of these projects if staff time allows. So essentially, the board is blessing the district to do that and allowing the general manager to have that authority to bring these projects forward. They generally were relatively small projects. In this case, we have a couple larger ones that were ongoing, but were not put in this budget. They had been in previous budgets. They were not in this budget. but they may be able to be brought back into this budget if staff time is available. Prime example of that is main cable access. It's been in and out of the budget for many, many years, and there may be able to be work on that done later this fiscal year. So it's provided with this opportunity to bring it into the budget if staff has time.
Yeah, Joe, this is Dick. I had a question on that.
Yes.
A minute ago, you mentioned there were 9 new projects. Are they on this list or is that separate from this list?
The 9 new projects are not on this list. These are projects, the 9 new projects, because these projects are not actually in the budget. They're in a project list that can be brought into the budget. Those 9 projects are each individually discussed in the budget chapters.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
There are also, and thank you for that question, because you reminded me, I meant to mention, there also are 4 projects that are in the budget where the budget itself is being used, as the board is being requested to increase the project budget for those projects. They are listed in your board item, and we're going to finish on the board item in just a second. And I will refer to those 4 projects and go over them at that time. They are also listed in each of the individual chapters. Okay, with that, we're going to end our discussion of using the board document, not the board document, but the budget document. Now we're going to move to the board report. Back to page 47 of your original board report, the report that we've been looking through the Finance Committee meeting. That page 47 is the first page of our board item 10, which went over the initial presentation of the proposed budget. And the reason we're coming back to this is it's important that at least we take a look at the recommendations that the board is going to be asked next meeting. This will come back to your Finance Committee in June, and then it will, if recommended by the board, will go to the board meeting in June. So the actions that the board has been asked to approve are listed there on the first page, page 47. You will be authorizing district goals, projects, accomplishments, changes to the reserves, changes to the table of organization that we just talked about. It includes those salary increases that we mentioned, both for the coalition, non-representative, not yet for the HU, because their contract will be under negotiation shortly. Includes the capital contribution amount of the 21 million that we mentioned. Authorizes the increase in the capital projects, which I will go over in a second. That's item 4. Item 5 is it authorized the following changes to the approved budget before we print it out, and that is to ensure that any board actions that occur between now and June 30th, the end of this year, get to be included in the budget. So we will do that. We will carry over any incomplete projects that we thought were going to be complete, but then didn't get completed. We will carry them over into the next budget. It allows the authority that I mentioned about the district project list allows to move projects from the list into the budget if the district staff has time to do so. And we'll include any final budget transfers that we've done in order to comply with the district's board's budgeting policy. So this would not increase the overall cost of the budget, but it may transfer resources between that. So item 4 mentioned that there were 4 projects that totaling about $8.5 million, where the board was being requested to increase the project budget. And if you turn to page 51 of this board item, so just down about 4 pages, those 4 projects are listed out. And we can go over them just quickly. The reason these projects that we're asking you to increase the budget in projects in the budget, we don't do this, we maybe do 1 or 2 of these each year, is because this allows the district to know now that the project budget is greater. It allows us to plan for that increased cost. And it allows us to plan for the total cost of the district's capital plan, because it keeps these costs into that total cost. So when we're going out seeking resources, we have a better sense of the overall project budget and the overall plan expense. The first one is the toll gantry project. Would be increase that by about $3 million from 7 to 10 million. And that's essentially this project is it's been in the budget for several years, and it's essentially updating that cost of that for the expenditure in material and labor that has been brought on by the pandemic and the impacted material and supply chain around the world. The next one item that's listed as item 2 here is the 4-point arch maintenance access. That project has also been in the budget. And it's essentially the increase of that project is by a significant increase of approximately $4 million. And that was because of the original budget underestimated the overall amount of scaffolding necessary to perform that work, and the durations of scaffolding would have to be up. In other words, we'd have to have that scaffolding in place to complete the work. Item 3, the self-approach viaducts, stringer rehab projects increased about $1 million. That's to rehabilitate the stringers associated with the framing in Tower 2 and Tower 3 on the south viaduct approach. Those are very tall towers. And that one is also to do with the ongoing increases that have occurred due to the ongoing pandemic, both for materials and in labor increased costs. Last is a much smaller increase of $250,000 in a cybersecurity strategic plan. And this was the district desire to, originally the plan was limited to one of the district's main networks, but now it has been expanded to cover all of the District 7 networks. And that was just, the importance of that expansion is due to the increased activity that we're all seeing around the globe and the concern of overall cybersecurity. So that's the summary of sort of the recommendations that are in the board report. And at this time, I am going to finish up, and I'm open for questions either on the board report or on the budget itself, but also letting you know that there's time for you to look things over and ask questions at your June meeting too, your June Finance Committee meeting also.
Joe, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation and getting a little bit in depth there. I've learned through my tenure on the bridge board to go to those status and summary pages of each division to try to get the quick overview before diving into some of the details. But you pointing out some of those other pages, I think, is really valuable for all of us to make sure that we're tracking it accordingly. You know, just to follow up for myself, just to follow up on what Dick had mentioned regarding some of the fare increases or different, taking that into account. How do we really track our own CPI or all division cost of doing business, especially you mentioned fuel prices and whatnot, and in some of those early charts where you're looking, comparing, you know, pre-pandemic, well, it's already been 3 years and just CPI alone at a modest rate. And I'm not sure what the bridge's internal CPI would be and how that is taken into account. Is there something that, you know, an overlay of a dashed line to show where the ultimate goal will be? I know that you take that into account internally. I'm just wondering how we can be more transparent with that.
Yes, I appreciate that. I was, when I was making this, I'll be honest, when I was making this presentation, I thought about that exact graph, and we do need it. So I appreciate you bringing it up. It is, in fact, I sent an email like 2 days ago to staff saying, you know, this is something we'll need to do. If we can get that done by your next meeting, we'll bring it. If not, we'll try to get it done and print it in the budget. But I'll make sure it comes to you as at a finance committee meeting in the future, because it is, I think we're at that time where for a while there, it was so far-fetched for us to get anywhere near the pre-COVID level. We didn't really spend our time thinking about that. Now that we're there, we need to know that the expenses of where we were 4 years ago is not where we will need to be if we need to get back to if we want to get back to the pre-COVID level. It'll be even greater. And you're right. Right. Yeah. And I just know for my purposes of looking at a budget initially, I want to see the overall trend of what's happening and just see where things are heading in the big picture, and then diving down into the details. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I do see our Chair Tirios with his hand up. President, I should say.
Thank you, Chair Rabbit. I do have one objection to a statement that occurs in a couple of different forms in the budget. The first place is at the bottom of page 47, but the second place, and I'll ask Amaret to take us to this, is at the top of page 205, the beginning of Appendix E. And if she would, if not, I'll just read it. Amaret, can you do that?
Give me 1 second to bring it up.
Okay. It's the more useful of the two because it's highlighted in yellow and it's easy for everybody to spot.
And it is page, we'll say that page again?
205, top of Appendix
205.
E.
Got it. Okay, I'm going to bring up the PDF because it's easier on my end.
Okay.
$205. Okay. Okay, 205, 205. All right. Oh, no. Okay, this is 205. Let's go to 205. This one?
That's the one right there. So in yellow, you will see this update in 2019 was the last update of the now completed 2014 strategic final plan. True. COVID has delayed the development of a new strategic financial plan. True. A new plan will be developed once impact of COVID on the district's businesses is more consistent. I will point out that bears very directly on the board's responsibilities. It is a statement of which, the inclusion of which in this document, I was unaware until I cracked the document the night before last and began to chew through it. And I assume that other members of the board were likewise unaware of this, even though it bears very directly on our responsibilities. It's a very fundamental responsibility of this board to plan for the future of the district. Not to do so is to say essentially, well, it's to abdicate our responsibility and just to respond to proposals by staff. I'm going to make everybody's day here. I did a little homework after I encountered this thing, and you're all aware that scientists have done a pretty fair sequencing of the novel coronaviruses, of the SARS-CoV-2 virus's genomic sequence, genome. Through that, we know that there are roughly 4 to the power of 14,941 possible mutations of the coronavirus. And by way of comparison, the estimate of the total number of atoms in the visible universe is 4 to the power of 135. So we have 4 to the power of 14,941 versus 4 to the power of 135. That is, there are literally more possible variations of the coronavirus than there are stars in the sky. And not only that, more than there are atoms in those stars in the sky and in everything around them. We don't know that we will, in any near point in the future, be out of the uncertainty imposed by this virus. Do we then say, we're not going to try to plan at all? Or do we try to acknowledge that planning is by nature contingent, that there are always changes in things, that new things occur that we have not anticipated, and try to plan with an acknowledgement of the possible variation in things. And so I object to that last sentence at the start of this appendix and to its occurrence on page 47. Those are the 2 instances I've picked up. There may be others. I would suggest either their elimination or something to this effect. The board of directors may, during the period of this, the board of directors may, during the period of this budget, undertake a strategic planning process under acknowledgement of the contingent nature imposed on it by the uncertainties of COVID. That gives us the option to try to tackle the future of this institution, and maybe in a way that says, okay, if we have situation A, then we take action B. If we have situation C, then we take action D. If we have situation A plus B, then we take action E. We, it seems to me, need to try to get our hands on the future of this district. It's been since 2019 that this thing has expired, that the plan of the district has expired. We've gone on a while without exercising our responsibilities. So that's my point. Thank you.
So this is Dennis, the general manager. Staff will make that change. if you had gone through a financial planning exercise 6 months ago, it would have contemplated shutting down your bus and ferry operations. So it's very fortunate that we waited until we had a little better picture of our financial future. And we're very fortunate that we received an extra $75 million in that nationwide competitive program just in March of this year. So the district leadership, management team, and our elected officials have been focused on the future of the district by getting outside money. And it's a credit to the strength of the district that we received $282.5 million in one-time federal COVID relief. That most recent $75 million that was just March 2 months ago was key. But we'll gladly make the change that you suggest, President Theriault, and we look forward to getting more federal money so that when we do the various planning exercises, the options that are available to the board are not grim.
Thank you. Thank you, General Manager Mulligan. I don't mean to denigrate staff at all. Staff is wonderful. And I just think we need to leave open the option of the board doing something on planning in the not too distant future. And the way things were phrased seems to preclude that. So thank you.
Director Grosball.
I'm a little hesitant to raise this when I see that the bridge revenues are 122 million and the bridge expenses are 89 million and projected 140.97. But I notice on page 96 of the budget that we have 22 bridge patrol officers. And I know I've raised this before, Dennis is probably smiling, but we've got 1 year left. Hopefully it's only 1 year left without that suicide net. And I did walk the bridge, I think 3 times in the last 6 or 7 months. And I think during the entire down and back, I saw a bridge patrol officer for maybe 15 minutes of the time. And I'm not being critical at all. I understand with only 22 bridge patrol officers and 2 of these walks were on the weekend that we can't cover that bridge. But I see in the Bridge Rail Foundation newsletter that we've already had 10 suicides through April, which is a higher ratio than last year, the last 2 years. So I'm not asking for an answer now. I guess I would ask the staff in the finance department and Dennis to at least consider whether or not we might consider hiring another couple patrol officers. I realize we can't just end it if the net's done in a year, but I don't know if we have any retirements coming up or not. But it is troubling that the suicide rate this year is higher than the last couple of years. 10 in 4 months is much higher than the last couple of years. So anyway, I don't need an answer now. I guess I would at least, I'll follow up with a question next month, but I guess I'd at least ask you to consider the issue.
I'll provide an answer now. We currently have vacancies in the department, so we have an item coming forward tomorrow to the Rules Committee under Chair Hernandez, where we will seek a wage increase for our patrol officers. We have difficulty recruiting, more importantly, retaining. It's the only department where people leave us after about 2-3 years. And so we have an item coming forward tomorrow. We have 3 patrol officers currently in training, but we have 5 vacancies. And if the board were to approve that wage increase tomorrow, it would probably make it much easier for us to fill those 5 vacancies, not to have more vacancies unfold over the rest of this year. Even when the suicide barrier is up, the patrol officers does lots of other things in addition to suicide interventions. We have large expressive activities that occur here. We have, lots of instances on the roadway. So we don't envision seeing a reduction in that department, but being able to fill all the vacant positions would go a long ways towards furthering our suicide intervention efforts.
Okay, I guess on 96, it says at the year end, I guess we budgeted for 22 and 82 at the year, and that doesn't mean they're filled. I guess that I misconstrued that. Okay.
That's correct. Okay. We have 5 vacancies currently in that department and 3 officers in training.
All right. Well, I may still push for more, but thank you. I appreciate the answer.
Director Thier. You're muted.
Okay, now, thank you so much, Chair Rabbit. So I had a comment and a question. I'll do the comment first. I do agree with President Theriault's comments. I think planning at the board level, strategic financial planning is very important at the appropriate time. That was my comment. My question is, with respect to the new capital projects, that are being done that are in the new budget. How were those chosen? And could you just tell us a little bit about those?
Sure, happy to. We have a prioritization program that it goes into place. Primarily those based on certain criteria. Criteria often are from from the assessments that go through in the various 4 division areas. Bridge has a very detailed assessment program every 2 years that we can extremely expensive and extremely detailed. They look at every piece of the bridge and then they come up with an assessment of its various levels, its condition. And clearly those that fall near the bottom end up being pushed up in priority. We also have Bridge also has very large capital projects that sit in the plan for a while. They know they need to, the retrofit coming up, but they know they need to repair a certain section of the bridge. They know they need to work on the main cable. They assess that, and then they get together a capital project that goes into the plan. And once it's ready, it moves quickly up to the top because of its high priority. We have facilities assessment plans that based both on going out and looking at the condition assessment of various facilities. And so if they rank lower, we're trying to bring up those the overall score of the district. And so we would prioritize those bottom ones and to get those into the plan. And then lastly, we have initiatives that are brought on by the general managers and the operating divisions that for needs to improve a particular type of service or something else. And they may be both physical elements, whether rebuilding something, or often now the IT support for those. And those get prioritized based on the demands that we have to improve or change a particular type of service. And so they can move up to the front quickly that way. Having brought all that together, then we have both meetings at my level with the DGMs and the officers, and then at Dennis's level, we all get together, and then we meet as a complete executive team and go over the capital budget. So it goes through another initiative to sort of kind of bring it down. And then lastly, there's capacity. We only have so much capacity as a division to put out so much capital projects. In fact, unfortunately, the demand outstrips capacity. And so then we have to limit back, and some projects that we would like to do end up a little lower and have to wait another year or so until we can get to them just from the capacity aspects. And that's one reason why we have that project list, because it allows us, once capacity frees up, to move a project in really quickly and get started on it.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have any questions for Joe? Not seeing any hands raised. Again, just want to say, Joe, thank you. Thank you, your staff. Thank you for everyone involved in crafting the budget document. Really the single most important policy document for the district, and that much more complicated due to all the impacts that we've had in the last so many years in trying to project the future, given so many uncertainties. So great work, really do appreciate that, and appreciate the opportunity to dive in as we go forward before we adopt it outright. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item, Madam Secretary?
We do. We have 2 speakers on this item. We have David Pilpel and Shane Weinstein. David, are you still with us?
Barely, but yeah, I mean, yes, I am. I have a number of comments. Let me speed through them, and then I will put them in writing so that you can also refer to them in the future. So on Joe's presentation, I use the budget regularly to address questions that I have throughout the year. Great work by Joe, Jennifer, Amy, and all the staff for their work. It's a very comprehensive budget book. I believe that staff is doing the absolute best they can during a trying time with a lot of moving parts here. Clearly, good efforts have been made to reduce the OPEB liabilities by moving to CalPERS, but more work is needed. That was referenced earlier in the presentation, as particularly as relates to ATU. The budget should be flexible to address increased transit demand and service as recovery hopefully continues. To that end, I support that flexibility by having more authorized than filled positions in bus and ferry, so those divisions have the flexibility to hire as demand warrants. However, I also support right-sizing the organization where the business has changed permanently. My main concerns are about organizational structure, position titles, and relative compensation levels. I think that district labor costs, overall salary and benefits, are roughly competitive with others in the area. You've got a specific adjustment tomorrow at the Rules Committee. Others have been made throughout the year. But again, I think that the labor costs are roughly competitive. On page 73 of the document, I would summarize the board-approved changes to the table of organization throughout the year, list the dates and the areas that were changed. I think that would be helpful. Those structural changes made throughout the year, particularly the December bus division changes, suggest others to me. I'll just go through them very quickly. The specific areas for me include the automotive maintenance positions, the electronic technician positions, the engineering department, facilities maintenance positions, human resources, management support in the 3 operating divisions, payroll, procurement, including contracts, purchasing, and storekeeping, revenue collection and analysis positions, and risk management and safety. I think there could be some clustering of some of those functions. Anyway, I could get into that in more detail another time. There may be some more minor issues elsewhere as well. Last 2 points, fuel cost projections, I think, go both ways. They increase district costs, but they also hopefully increase transit ridership. And I'm wondering if staff thinks that they sort of balance each other out over time. And I do intend to follow up with a letter to the board summarizing these comments, perhaps a little more detail. Thanks for listening. I think that's it for me for today. Appreciate all the work done here. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Next, we have Shane Weinstein. Shane, are you still with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thanks a lot. Welcome, Shane.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much. Good morning, Chair Rabbit and committee members. Shane Weinstein, president of ATU. I represent all the bus drivers in the district. After looking over the proposed budget, on page 117, we have 275 full-time operators that are budgeted for the upcoming year. Before I go forward, Mr. Mulligan just stated that the Bridge Patrol is the only group that leaves after roughly 2 or 3 years. That's just simply not true. Currently, we have 176 operators total at the district. We've lost 100 operators since August of 2020, and furthermore, we've lost 20 operators just since the beginning of the year. Like I said, since August of 2020, we have brought on 4 operators, 4 total, in the time that we've lost 100. So to be budgeting at 275 when we're 100 people short already, we should be using that money and putting it in other places. At the same time, the district's pension plan that deals with the bus operators is in an emergency status, funded at roughly 50% or lower. There is no chance whatsoever that the district will get anywhere near 275 operators. We're actually going in the opposite direction, which is down. Since this money is already budgeted for bus operators, my suggestion is that if the district doesn't reach that 275 operator mark, that the monies that come from not reaching that 275 mark be used to pay off the unfunded liability of a pension plan that's funded at 50% or less, and a plan also that the district is responsible for. There needs to be a plan going forward. We have 176 operators paying into a pension plan with roughly 400 to 450 drawing retirees. That's inherently wrong. It's inherently bad. We have to do something about it. The Golden Gate Bridge is the only public transit agency in the state of California that does not pay the actuarially determined contribution. I hope everybody's listening to that. Very quickly need to address also what's happening to bus ridership, bringing back bus ridership. Nothing. That's what's going on. We're the only agency that's cut service. You're going to hear from Mr. Mulligan saying if they're not swimming across the strait, that we know what they're doing. He's also going to compare to you, he's also going to compare pre-COVID levels to current. Way back then, we had 240 commute trips into the city. Now we have 30. He's comparing apples and oranges. We don't even have the routes. We don't have anything. So we need to start being honest about where this money is going and what we're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shane. That concludes public comment.
Great, thank you very much. I want to thank again staffs. This was staff's initial presentation of the budget. No action is required today. Obviously, encourage everyone to review the budget book and reach out with staff with any questions as we go forward. The budget that will be before us again next month for adoption. So we'll move on then to item 11 on the agenda, which is closed session. Before we do that, I want to thank everyone for their patience during the meetings today. Obviously, we went long for good reason. We'll be leaving the video meeting for the duration of our closed session item and return after the closed session. Members of the public who wish to stay on the line or live stream may do so until our return. I know that we received a dial-in number for the closed session in our packet, and hopefully you all have that handy. And with that, I'll turn to our attorney, Kim Manolius, who will take us into closed session. Kim, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Abbott. At this time, the Finance Auditing Committee will go into closed session for a conference with legal counsel regarding some existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9A. And that's with regard to the case that's listed on the agenda, McCoy versus Golden Gate Bridge District.
Thank you, everyone. It's a reminder to have our directors and staff mute their microphones on the computers and turn off your camera. And we'd like you now to call into the phone number provided in the closed session report. Thank you. Right, looks like we have everyone except Barb Parr back, but that's okay. You still have a quorum and you're ready to continue. Looks
Great,
like we
thank you
can
very
come
much.
on
Kim,
out.
can you please provide the closed session report?
Of course, Chair Abbott, thank you. The committee met in closed session with legal counsel regarding the McCoy case as listed on the agenda and gave its counsel appropriate guidance as to how to handle the matter. Thanks.
Great, and thank you, Mr. Manolius. Madam Secretary, is there anyone from the public wishing to address this committee under item number 12, public comment?
We have no other speakers for this meeting.
Great, thank you. We've reached the end of the agenda. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Director Giudice.
And a second?
Second.
Great, hearing no objections, this concludes the meeting of the Finance Auditing Committee. Thank you, everyone. Thank you most especially to staff. And thank you, colleagues. The time is 12:49 p.m. So thank you, everyone. See
Thank
tomorrow.
you.
Clearance from
Thanks,
David.
everyone.
See you all
Thanks,
tomorrow.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, do we end the live stream?